Okay, hello and good early evening. Today is, someone help me out here for today, August 29th, 2022. This is a special meeting of the Cupertino City Council. Madam City Clerk, would you please conduct the roll call?
Councilmember Moore?
Here.
Councilmember Way?
Here.
Councilmember Willie?
Here.
Vice Mayor Chow?
Here.
Mayor Paul?
And I am here. Thank you very much, Madam City Clerk. All right, so today we have a couple of items on our special meeting agenda. Would anyone like to introduce the first item? And this has to do with the County Unhoused Task Force. I was approached by a member of, I'm sorry, go ahead, Councilmember Willie.
Maybe introduce our city manager?
Wow, what a great idea. Councilmember Willie, that's great. So City Manager Wu, I know that you're kind of getting onboarded right now with regard to the Zoom function on your laptop. Are you ready to be introduced to the public? And I think video, if you could point a camera over at Pamela Wu, our new city manager. All right, welcome to Cupertino on your first day. We wanted to break you in with a very minor element of the housing element. And so thank you for being with us here this evening. Do you care to say a few words to the public? Welcome, Pamela.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of the council. Thank you. My very first day, my pleasure to be here with the Cupertino residents and the community. And thank you for extending my first day to a special council meeting. Looking forward to get back to my element to talk about the housing element. The city team and equally with the council has shown me nothing but just welcome and support. So really looking to explore my role with the city of Cupertino. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, City Manager Wu. So we will go ahead and go to the special meeting agenda. And so the first item has to do with the unhoused task force from the county. I was contacted by a member of Supervisor Cindy Chavez's staff, and they asked that we designate other people for the unhoused task force because on their official roles, they had Stephen Scharf and Rod Sinks. And so as delightful as I'm sure that would be to have that meeting with them in the representative capacity, unfortunately, they're not elected representatives of Cupertino anymore. And so I suggested that we put this on the agenda so that we could get the council approval in a timely fashion. They were asking for an answer back, I believe, before September 5th. And our next meeting is on September 6th, or perhaps they're asking for it earlier than that. But in any event, being August 29th, we have time. The default request is to have the mayor and the vice mayor, so myself and council member Vice Mayor Liang Chow, respectively, serve as the alternate or as the designee and the, or I guess the designees to the unhoused task force in the county. So if there's any elaboration that staff would like to do, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, I would just say, let's go ahead and take any public discussion on it. I don't see hands raised from the public with some attendees. I do see one hand raised from the council. And so Councilmember Moore, would you care to either make a motion, ask a question, or have some discussion on this agenda item?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I was wondering what the duration of this task force would be, because I'm thinking in terms of continuity, and I imagine it's going to be something that's going to take maybe a couple of years. So could you let us know?
Sure. I don't know when the task force began, but it has been going for at least 3 years now. A couple of years ago, actually maybe at least 4 years, since when I was mayor in 2018, I believe the task force was occurring and I was on that task force. It has generally not met all that frequently, but in the last couple of years with COVID, that's kind of been more the case. But I think that as we're opening back up, we'll probably be meeting a bit more frequently. I don't know what the prognosis is with regard to the estimated time that this will last, but I agree that it is of critical importance and that it would not be a bad idea at all during the December committee assignments to go ahead and make that part of the committee assignments going forward for the year. But in my experience, it's been meeting on an annual basis because, of course, getting all those schedules rounded together around the county is complex. But But the meeting this year is coming up in September, and so they're asking for designees.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Well, at this time, seeing no further hands raised, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion for the recommended action. Would anyone like to make that motion? Councilmember Way?
So moved.
Okay. Would anyone like to second that motion? And I see Councilmember Moore, you have your hand raised.
Second, Moore?
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember. And so I don't see further hands for discussion. Let's go ahead and take a roll call vote on this item. Madam City Clerk?
I apologize, Mayor. Who are the appointees?
The appointees are myself and Vice Mayor Chow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Moore?
Aye. But there, I do see a hand raised from the Vice Mayor.
Yeah,
Okay, Vice Mayor Chow. Because Madam City Clerk, if you wouldn't mind holding that vote in abeyance at this point. Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Chow, please proceed.
yeah, sorry. I just thinking it over. I think Councilmember Moore has a point for continuity. If she would like to be on the committee, I think I'm happy to yield my seat. Yeah.
Okay, I'm more than happy to ask the movement whether Councilmember Way would be willing to have Councilmember Moore instead of Vice Mayor Chow on the committee, on the
Sure.
task force rather. Okay, great. And Councilmember Woolley, is that okay with you to amend? All right. So the movement and the seconder have approved, and so on the table are myself, Mayor Darcy Paul, and Councilmember Kitty Moore on the County Unhoused Task Force. Madam City Clerk, would you please conduct a roll call vote?
Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Way?
Aye.
Councilmember Woolley?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Chow?
I
Mayor Paul?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much, Madam City Clerk. We are on to our next agenda item. And this agenda item, I'm going to go ahead and let our city manager introduce it. Pamela, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The item before you is to discuss the priority housing sites for the 2023 and 2031 housing element update, and this has been continued from the August 16 meeting. We also have the Community and Development Director, Benjamin Fu, and his team available to make the presentation and also to provide the update to you.
Sounds good. Thanks very much, Madam City Manager. And so let's go ahead. Let me navigate to my Zoom function here. I see Director Fu, your camera's on. Would you like to introduce the presenter for this item tonight?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and welcome, Mr. City Manager and council members. With us tonight, we have Luke Connolly, a senior planner. Luke will be providing the bulk of the presentation. We also have the consultants here as well, Andy Flower from EMC, as well as David Masterson from ELS Architecture here in support. We also have our planning manager, Pugh Ghosh, here as well. But Luke, please go ahead with your presentation, if it's all right with you, Mr. Mayor.
Absolutely. Take it away, Luke. Thanks, Ben.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor Paul, members of the council. Let me share my screen. Okay, we're here tonight to talk about the six-cycle housing element update, and in particular, I'm going to try to spend 30 minutes going through all about 40 slides that are going to give an overview of the housing element update, the process, and this should be something that will inform people who haven't attended earlier meetings, but will also be a good overview for the people who have been participating all along. Get in the background on the housing element update. In particular tonight, we're focusing on the sites inventory, which is something we spent a lot of time on this year. It's essentially the list of the housing sites that we're trying to get finalized. So in terms of the housing element, it's a part of the city's general plan, and as its name indicates, it's really the guiding document on the city's housing policies and programs. While a general plan, it typically looks ahead 20 or 30 years, your housing element update's a little different in the sense that state law requires it to be updated every 8 years. So we're looking at the period right now, 2023 to 2031, which is the sixth cycle as the fifth cycle is winding down. The sites inventory, which is what we're going to be getting into tonight, is really the mechanism to comply with our RHNA, or our Regional Housing Needs Allocation, which is the number of housing units that's assigned by the state to cities to be constructed in that 8-year period. Now, when we talk about housing and the housing element, one thing important to keep in mind is what cities are focused on is being able to accommodate housing. There's not a housing project that's necessarily proposed. So what this slide indicates is the collaborative effort that goes into actually developing housing. You have city commissions like the Housing Commission and Planning Commission who've already extensively reviewed the sites inventory. You have regional players like ABAG. And of course, at the state level, you have the Housing and Community Development Department who will ultimately certify the city's housing element. And with that, you have the community itself. So this is a very participatory, collaborative process. But as we go please keep in mind, this is a way of accommodating housing. There is no specific project that's actually proposed. Briefly, I just want to show this slide. This is for the 5th cycle housing element. And the top blue row shows what the RENA was for the time period 2015 to 2023. So you see the city had a little over 1,000 housing units, 1,064 to develop or accommodate during that time period. And during that time period, the city entitled, particularly with the Valco project, far more units than that. A little over 400 of them were built, but the area in green that's referred to on this table as the pipeline, that's something we're going to be talking to a little bit more today because that's a key aspect of the sites inventory for the city of Cupertino. Now, this is the 6th cycle RENA. So you went from 1,064 units in the 5th cycle to now a little over 4 times that, at 4,588 units. And another thing to remember when you're looking at the RENA is not just the sheer number, but the income categories that go into that, broken down by very low, low, moderate, and above moderate or market rate housing. So as this shows, the majority of your housing units, 2635, are in the affordable categories between very low and moderate. That comes out to about 57% affordable, 43% of the total RENA is market rate. Now, one thing to keep in mind as we get into this, and I'd mentioned the pipeline projects, is of the full RENA, the 4588 figure, the city is currently meeting its low and market rate needs because it has significant pipeline units. So why is this important? It's important because we need to focus on the very low and moderate income categories, where we have 1193 and 755 unit. That's really the focus of when we're trying to identify new housing sites and total housing units to comply with those income categories. This table is taken from the staff report. And the top row here shows, again, the RENA broken down by income category with the total on the right. The second row shows the pipeline projects. We have 9 of those listed. And as this indicates, when you look in the low and above moderate columns, the pipeline projects alone are already exceeding what our RENA is for those income categories. Now, unfortunately, you can't get a credit that's applied for exceeding that could be applied to other income categories. So the city of Cupertino is having to focus on very low and moderate income, as I said earlier. We've got about 833 very low income, 655 moderate income, for a total of 1,488 units, which is really the focus of what the city needs to meet for this upcoming housing element cycle. A little more on the pipeline projects again. When we say pipeline, we're talking about projects that have their entitlements or are likely to. They're essentially in the development pipeline, but they haven't pulled building permits, nor are they constructed. So these are projects that have or should soon have their discretionary approvals through the city. Cupertino's pipeline units comes to over 3,500, it's 3,545, so it's a very significant amount for the city. Now, in addition to that, and this is on our recommended sites inventory, which is attachment D to the current staff report, there's another almost 2,100 units identified that we're calling Tier 1. These are the recommended units, and this is what the Housing and Planning Commission at the end of June and beginning of July in their hearings recommended be placed on the housing sites inventory. Now, in addition to those, based on recent years' development rates, we can also assume between 2023 and 2031, the city should produce about 200 accessory dwelling units. So those can count towards the RENA as well. This is a quick look at the pipeline projects. This is taken from, again, the attachment D table. It shows the city has 9 pipeline projects. And one thing I want to be clear about is 6 of these are fully entitled, whereas the projects labeled P4, P5, and P8 are on file. They do not have their full development entitlements, but we did include them on the list because they've been on file and they've been working with staff towards realizing these projects. The Valco project at the top and the Hamptons at the bottom, as you can see, make up the biggest share. Over 3,000 of the 3,500 units come from those 2 projects alone. In the course of this year, starting on January 25, the Planning Commission began a series of study sessions. We've had 6 study sessions and meetings in all with the Planning Commission, the last 2 involving the Housing Commission. And when we started this, we looked at nearly 400 properties that met the HCD criteria, and that was largely based on area. These are properties between 1/2 and 10 acres, which were deemed to be potential housing sites. Through this hearing process, we've now focused it to where we have 56 properties. And the June 28 and July 5 joint Planning and Housing Commission meetings, that's where we resulted in getting this recommendation. And in those hearings, we had a very extensive public comment process, as some of you may have been able to watch and listen to. As I just said, in addition to the pipeline sites, we have 56 Tier 1 properties. These are the recommended sites. We also have some properties we're calling Tier 2, which are not recommended, but have been left on the inventory for City Council consideration. Of these 56 properties, again, we have about 2,100 units potentially that could be realized from them. 44, or about 80% of the 56 properties, have a minimum density proposed of 30 units per acre. Some have up to 50 units per acre. There are no sites over 50 units per acre. The reason the 30 unit per acre threshold is important is that's the threshold for which the HCD considers sites to be eligible as affordable housing. Sites lower density could certainly still be good housing sites, but the potential for affordability is diminished as density goes below 30. So that's something to keep in mind. What we got out of meeting with the Planning Commission were several goals when we were trying to identify housing sites. First off was to not cluster new housing in the city's eastern area, but to try to disperse it and include as many units as we could on the western side of the city. Also to avoid displacing existing uses, particularly residential uses. So to avoid having people get displaced through redevelopment. Another goal that the Planning Commission cited was to minimize upzoning to the extent feasible. So we've tried to do that as we've gone through this by having more sites. The fewer sites, generally, the more you'd have to upzone. And also another factor that the commission had emphasized was that housing sites should try to contribute to counteracting the school enrollment trends that are pretty much declining statewide. We have 3 areas essentially that are getting about, of the Tier 1 sites, of those 2,100 units I've mentioned, about 1,400 of those, a little more, are going into 3 areas. Stelling Gateway at the north, just north of 280 or around Stelling and Homestead's intersection. The Valco area to the right in the northeast part of the city. And at the south along South De Anza Boulevard between Prospect Road and Highway 85. These are really the 3 target areas for housing units that we're recommending. A couple things that came out of the Planning Commission recommendations were the idea of having the higher densities for several of the west side sites, and in particular along De Anza Boulevard. When we had presented this to the commissions at the end of June, the recommendation was to have 30 units per acre on South De Anza, and the commissions recommended having that go up to 50 per acre. Another concept that the commissions mentioned were the Stevens Creek, which has a couple of sites, and South De Anza, to have 50 units per acre along the street frontages, but where those properties backed up and directly abutted single-family residential, to hold the density down to 30 units per acre on De Anza and 25 on Stevens Creek Boulevard. Our recommended sites inventory when calculating the units, if you refer to attachment D, That is all calculated based on 50 dwellings per acre. So if we were to do this essentially split density, it would result in a reduction in those two areas. This is one site that is not up for recommendation, but I know there has been some public interest in this and maybe a little confusion about why it's on the inventory. This is, as a tier 2 site, we've added the heart of the city crossroads on the south side of Stevens Creek between Stelling and De Anza Boulevard, only because a couple of the buildings, the former restaurants, Fontana's and Pizza Hut, were mentioned frequently at the Planning Commission meetings. I just want to be clear that this is not listed as a tier 1 site. It does not factor in right now as a recommended housing location, but should it come up in the discussion, we wanted to include that. And as you can see, it's a very large property where the Pizza Hut site is part of that area 15D that fronts the road. So it's not just a small standalone lot, but is part of a much larger site. Another concept mentioned in the staff report and something that HCD talks about in their documents is the idea of having a housing buffer. The buffer is really a percentage that would be in addition to the RHNA. And HCD recommends having a buffer of about 15 to 30%. This is not a requirement, but is simply something that is advised by HCD so that if you have sites developing in the 8-year period that say develop at different income levels than anticipated or perhaps a lower density, that by having a buffer, you have additional housing sites available so you're still able to meet your RHNA at all of the income categories. And again, I believe the city of Cupertino really needs to focus on just the very low and the moderate income categories. Excuse me. And currently right now, the buffer is close to 30%. It's about 27%. So right now, the city is getting at the upper end of the HCD recommendation. This is something I alluded to earlier, just to keep in mind that as a general rule of thumb, the more sites you have, the less likely you're going to have to upzone sites to intensify the density. The fewer sites you have, the more likely you're going to have to upzone to meet your RHNA. And again, right now the city has 56 sites in addition to pipeline, so there's quite a few potential housing sites on the list. This is a graphic we included from the League of Cities because this conversation often comes up is what type of housing, what does it look like at certain densities? So when somebody says 30 or 50 units per acre, what are you talking about? So we wanted to include this to show that typically sites, if you're looking at 12 units per acre or less, you're talking about small lot, single family or duet houses. Townhomes generally run between the mid-teens and the mid-20s. Walk-up apartments and condominiums, you're getting up to about 30 per acre. And beyond that, in the 40, 50 per acre range, you're looking at more of a podium type development with structured parking. This is very general as a rule of thumb, but we thought it was important because this has come up in prior meetings so people have some point of reference. In terms of outreach, we've done quite a bit of that as well. All households in January were mailed postcards concerning the housing element update. And all owners whose properties could have potentially qualified as housing sites were sent letters. Many of them received follow-up letters. The city has used its website as well as the engagecupertino.org website and the Balancing Act map, which will be talked about tonight that EMC Planning has set up, as well to reach out to people. E-notifications have gone out for our meetings, and social media such as Facebook, Twitter, and Nextdoor have all been used to notify people of meetings. Additionally, outside of the formal meetings, there were well-attended community meetings held in May and July. There will be another one at the end of September. These meetings are largely to comply with the affirmatively furthering fair housing focus that HCD is requiring for this housing element update. And again, those meetings have been well attended, and we plan to have one more at the end of September. I want to briefly go through the next 5 slides to just sum up what is in more detail in your packet, I believe in attachment B, that this refers to surveys that EMC has just wrapped up that started in June and concluded on August 16th, and these were focused on the individual housing sites where people could comment on the site or the density, whether they liked it or not. So it was a way of receiving direct input on the potential housing sites. We got about 1,000 individual comments on 53 of the properties, And overall, the satisfaction rate was fairly high. We took a conservative approach, coming up with a figure of 58%. What emerged from this is we had some areas, there's 6 sites that are shown here. And again, I just want to go through this briefly, but these were the sites that tended to get the most negative response for people who had weighed in on these. There were just 6 of them. And a couple in particular in Monte Vista North and South Blaney had a high number of responses, 119 and 87 shown there, with the majority of the people responding not favorably. Similar to where the majority of our Tier 1 housing is going, that's where we receive most response in properties. As you can see, Stelling Gateway, Homestead, Valco, South Piazza, and also to the left of your screen in Monte Vista North, that was the site on Linda Vista that I'm sure we'll be talking about later that got the most individual response to that site being listed. Again, these were some other sites, 4 of them, where we had about a split response, slightly below 50%. And then the majority of these other sites, these are all Tier 2 properties. So none of these factor in as recommended housing sites. But the thing to note is the majority of these in Heart of the City Crossroads, Heart of the City Central and East, as well as some South Piazza sites that are Tier 2, generally got a favorable response. Next steps in this process. Why what we're really talking about tonight with the sites inventory and why it needs to get finalized is it is the critical path for getting our environmental review process started. There's going to be an environmental impact report prepared for this project that will include looking at rezoning for the sites. So until we can get this finalized and know which sites we're looking at, how many units at what densities, we can't really move on the environmental document. The due date or the certification date that was anticipated for Bay Area cities was January 31, 2023. Like the majority of Bay Area cities, Cupertino is not going to be able to meet this date for having its housing element certified. So what that really means is that by a year from that date, January 31, 2024, we'll need to not only have the housing element certified, but have all of the individual housing sites rezoned to be able to accommodate the RHNA. If you had the real significant change is for cities that were certified on time, that being January 2023, they'd have had 3 years to rezone. We will have 1. It's estimated that the EIR process is going to run about 9 months' time. So if we were to get the housing sites inventory finalized this week, we're looking at hopefully having a draft EIR around Memorial Day, beginning of June next year. Other next steps, outside of the housing sites inventory, the Housing Commission is going to work with the policy and program aspect of this to try to tie our housing programs back to those sites. We're hoping to have meetings with the Housing Commission as soon as possible, possibly even in late September, and to shortly thereafter have a public draft of a housing element that goes through a comment period that's very similar to CEQA, where there's a 30-day comment period on the draft. HCD will be reviewing all the comments received and responses to those. So it is very, if you have familiarity with the CEQA process, this is a very similar way to approach things. Again, tonight, just to emphasize, because there's so much to deal with the housing element, what we're really here trying to focus on tonight are the housing sites and their density. It's very easy to tie these into discussions of zoning or policy, but for tonight, this is what we're going to try to focus on. Zoning and policy discussions will certainly come later and are also a key aspect of the housing element. I've got about a dozen more slides here. I just want to say that sort of ends the overview part of the presentation. And the goal now is that as we're going to be going into, go to the next slide, these are all the different areas of the city, 16 of them, that have housing units proposed. Not all the areas of the city do. I'm going to try to cover the first half of these that roughly move from the eastern portion of the city to the western portion. So we'll be looking at the housing sites in North Valco Park, Valco Shopping District, North and South Blaney, part of the city, East, Central, and Crossroads, and ending this part of the presentation on the Homestead Stelling Gateway area. With time permitting, we could conceivably get to the other 8 areas, but we just want to try to focus on essentially half the city in this chunk now for anybody that might want to comment directly on those areas. Okay, here's a slide that's essentially looking at the whole city and classifying all the housing sites. Tier 1 is shown in yellow. Again, those are your recommended housing sites. Tier 2 is shown in orange. Those sites are up for consideration, but do not have any housing units proposed on them now. They could be added to the list if Tier 1 sites were deleted, or added if the council felt they were just good, viable housing sites. The green areas are the 9 pipeline projects, and they will be showing up on all of the subsequent maps I'm going to run through quickly. Okay, here's the Valco Park North special area. So this is just north of 280, near Apple, near the Hamptons. You could see Valco in green at the bottom. I believe this is really what's the Cupertino Village Shopping Center. The red dot on the site indicates that the city has received owner interest in the form of a letter or an email. And what you also see, the small table on the map there, is target density and height. While it's an imperfect thing, we've tried to express height in feet based on density because this has been a topic at several of the meetings. So when we're talking about sites that are 50 dwelling units per acre, we're looking at a building height of about 65 feet. All of the sites shown here on this map are listed at 30 units per acre per the Planning Commission recommendation. The table below, I believe, where it says 40 units per acre, 45 foot height, 45 feet would be the recommended height for 30 dwelling units per acre. So the 35 on that last row below there, that would be describing something that I would say would be more like a 20 unit per acre site. The next site just on the other side of 280 and right north of Valco is an undeveloped property that's often referred to as the Simeon site. We also have owner interest on this, and this looks like a site that could potentially be a very good affordable housing location. The next tier is the North Blaney area. There are 2 properties up there just south of 280 on the east side of North Blaney. The larger of the 2 sites is a mini storage with an adjacent single family home is what's existing on those sites today. And these are also proposed at 30 dwelling units per acre. And the next area is South Blaney. These projects are between South Blaney on the right and De Anza Boulevard on the left, and they are located on the north side of Bollinger. We have owner interest for the little shopping center at the corner of Bollinger and South Blaney. There's a total of 6 properties. The density proposed for the South Blaney Shopping Center is 20 units per acre and 30 units per acre for the sites on the western portion of that map. Moving to Heart of the City East, there directly below the Valco site shown in green are the Tier 1 properties. There are really 2 sites here. I believe the 18A is referred to as United Furniture site. And just to the east of that is a gas station location. These are the only Tier 1 properties on Stevens Creek Boulevard. They are recommended at 50 units per acre, again, with the Planning Commission recommendation that the rear of these sites respect the density of their neighborhoods and have a lower density and or lower building height on them. The Heart of the City Central Special Area, we've included this, but the sites shown in orange are not Tier 1 sites, so there are no units recommended in this area. Similarly, on Heart of the City Crossroads, which was shown earlier, all of the sites that are listed here, none of them are recommended or counting towards Tier 1 housing units. We did feel, given the discussions that came up at the Planning Commission, that it was important to include this slide in case anybody was still interested in sites such as Fontana's or the former Pizza Hut. But again, this is not recommended, and the large block there on the south side of Stevens Creek Boulevard, we do not have any owner interest received from the property owner. And the last area before I'm going to conclude this part of the presentation we're looking at is the Homestead area north of 280. Most of the development is on either side, or not development, most of the Tier 1 properties are on either side of Stelling Road on the south side of Homestead. And we have a couple other smaller sites to the west, 19A and B, for which we have owner interest. There's the remaining information for those. The cluster of sites along Stelling and Homestead are proposed to be 50 dwelling unit per acre sites, similar to what we're looking at on Stevens Creek Boulevard and South Beanza Boulevard. So at this point, I've gone through the overview and half of the city, more or less, half of the areas. And that's going to conclude my presentation at this point. So I would be happy to turn this back to the council, or if there would be public comment taken at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Luke. And so let me go ahead and go through the process here. I'm going to go ahead and share one panel of my screen. So this was the overview slide. If you're following along and you've downloaded the presentations on our website, I believe this is slide number 29 on page 16, although that might be a little bit off. Let me just take a quick look. Yes, it is slide 29. It's on page 15. And so the overview presentation was what Luke just presented. He presented the first 8 areas out of 16. We'll take public comment now. You're free to comment on any, and I'm speaking on the Zoom function. I see in front of my screen here, video has me on here. But if video, you could share the Zoom screen if it's being shared. If it's not, then just let me know and I can attempt to share it depending on what you guys see. Oh, you only see a blank screen? Okay, so that's probably why. So if you, maybe, why don't I do this? Why don't I stop the share, and then whoever was sharing their screen, was that Luke? Were you providing it, or was maybe the city clerk's office doing the presentations?
Yes, Mayor Paul, I could bring that back up if you'd like.
Yeah, why don't you bring up slide number 30 again, and then we'll show the people looking on. Okay, so that should be, I don't know what slide that is. It's probably in the 40s or something. Yes, slide number 30 there. Okay, so to make it clear where we are procedurally, we're going through the first 8 sites here, A through H, in terms of the maps that we just looked at. And so we do invite public comment generally on this item, but we're going to be taking these in tranches because we anticipate getting through roughly half this evening and possibly needing to continue this to tomorrow. One thing I will say before we set those expectations going forward in this exercise is that tomorrow we did feel it was very necessary to have a live discussion and to give people time to provide public comment at this time at the very beginning of the item. But if we do continue it to tomorrow, we will likely notice it as a Zoom-only meeting. And so let me just check in with the city manager and the city attorney. Are you okay with that, or do you hear any issues potentially? Because I know that we've had regular meetings in the past where we continued the Tuesday meeting to a Thursday, and the Thursday meeting has been Zoom only. So perhaps, Mr. City Attorney, if you'd care to weigh in on that one.
So there would be no reason for any of us to attend, but given that the meeting was noticed as a hybrid meeting, we would have to make this space available if people wanted to come watch the meeting.
I see. Okay, so I guess we wouldn't be renoticing it as a Zoom meeting then only.
Well, we would be running out of, we've got 24 hours if we wanted to renotice it, right? So
right, exactly.
So
we wouldn't have time to. Okay, so we've been able to do that from Tuesday to Thursday in the past, but we wouldn't be able to do that from Monday to Tuesday. Or
right, we'll have to continue it, and so we could certainly all agree amongst ourselves and let the public know that we won't be here in person, but for Brown Act purposes, we'd want the space to be available if somebody wanted to come watch the meeting and provide comment.
So it essentially have to be unlocked and available to the public. Okay, understood. So let's cross that bridge when and if we get to it. And so Once again, everyone, we're taking public comment generally for this item too. And so if you are on Zoom, please raise your hand for public comment. If you are here live, please fill out a blue card. We'll take public comment on all of these items, but please just be advised that we're looking at the first 8 of them, A through H, for the various proposed sites for site selection of the housing element. And so let me go to my participants here. Right now I have 6 participants with hands up in Zoom. That just turned into 5 and then 6, now 7. Okay, so they are Jennifer, Kalisha Webster, Kylie Clark, Michael Strauss, Joshua Pringle, Govind Tadachari, Kylie Clark again, Mayor Dundon, and Scott Connolly. And so we ask that in the time that the first speaker is speaking, please either have your hand raised in Zoom, and if you're live, please have your blue card filled out. There's another way to have your comments read into the record, and that's if you email your comments to city clerk, that's all one word, at cupertino.org in the time allocated for the first person to speak. And so we will go in that order, the Zoom hands, and then the blue cards live, and then the comments read into the record by the city clerk. So Jennifer, welcome, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Darcy. Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffin, and I actually had a phone call a few seconds ago, and I sent them away. So I'm going to just start out, since I was a bit confused. One of the things of my concern, and I compliment the staff and consultants on the maps. I thought they were very well done, an improvement. There is something that is a tier 1 site, which is 24A, which is in the Valco complex. It is the site that is next to the quote hole in the wall, next to 280 and the back property. Why is that a tier 1? I understand they're trying to put supportive housing in there, but we have not discussed this, and I don't think that that's a good tier 1. I live near that area, and the east side needs to know what is going in there, and we will be asking questions about it. The other sites that were in black is, you have to bear with me here because there's a lot of papers. There's 23E, 23G, and 23H on Wildflower Way and South Dianza Boulevard. Why are these sites in black, and what do they mean? I also will just make a statement. HCD right now has viciously attacked the city of San Francisco and is saying very, very negative things about the city. This is absolutely, HCD should not be doing that. You do not do that to people, to cities that you are dealing with. HCD is making up its own rules, and it's becoming to be a very, very dangerous adversary. I have been following the SCAG COG in Southern California. They were recently given 3 years. There was a bill that was passed in July. They have been gone from 1 year to 3 years to rezone. We need to look at that. Northern California should not be treated any differently. I do not agree with HCD. They are out of line. They have not asked the public. And I will tell you right now, I will never vote for Gavin Newsom as president if this nonsense does not stop with HCD. These numbers are out of line. And I have been following this very carefully for the last 4 years, and it is intensely for the last year and a half. I will not have my state put through this type of mayhem. It is insulting. And as a voting member of this state, I will not have my city be treated the way HCD. Nobody, no agency in this state. Can you imagine NASA behaving that way? It will not be tolerated. There will be pushback. There is an initiative called the Fair Neighborhood Initiative that's coming out of Southern California that in 2024 will go in as an initiative to repeal SB 9 and SB 10. This is what happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. And in addition to the names that I read off previously, we have Rhoda Fry as well on Zoom. Madam City Clerk, are there any live blue cards for this item to speak?
No, Mayor.
There are not. Okay. And how about emails? Did any emails arrive during the time for our first speaker?
No, Mayor.
No emails, okay. Okay, so our next speaker is Kylie Webster. Welcome, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Kylie Webster, and I am the Senior Housing Advocate at Housing Choices, a nonprofit service provider helping people with developmental and other disabilities to find and retain affordable housing throughout Santa Clara County. In developing the housing sites inventory, HCD requires cities to affirmatively further fair housing. In order to do so, the city must first complete a comprehensive housing needs analysis of special needs groups, assessment of fair housing, and housing constraints analysis. Only once those sections of the housing element are completed and specific housing needs and development constraints identified, can the city create a compliant housing sites inventory which meets HCD's requirements to affirmatively further fair housing. Because the city has chosen to proceed with developing its housing sites inventory before these other sections are complete, there are many shortfalls that HCD is likely to call out in the current list. We know this because HCD has provided feedback to other jurisdictions that have made similar errors, in particular overcounting pipeline projects that are not adequately substantiated as being likely to get developed, as is the case in San Francisco. To ensure that Cupertino does not end up repeating the mistakes of San Francisco and other jurisdictions, the city should commit to the following: reduce reliance on pipeline projects and direct staff to find additional backup sites for projects in the event that site development cannot begin or be completed within the 8-year period of the housing element, expanding the buffer by increasing densities on key sites or by including more sites, reconsider upzoning as a policy tool to increase sites zoned for multifamily buildings throughout the city, prioritize and add more sites in the heart of the city near jobs, transit, and services, and avoid projects which would displace current residents with little additional housing being built. Instead, the city should prioritize sites and policies which increase net new homes while minimizing displacement of current residents. Please continue your work for a sustainable plan that will provide housing for all incomes and abilities, and that will further fair housing practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Kylie. Our next speaker is Kylie Clark. Welcome, Kylie.
Hello, my name is actually Anusha Manava. I don't know why it's showed up as Kylie Clark, but I am a program associate at West Valley Community Services, and I've been working closely with our clients, other community members, and housing element staff to collaborate in bringing more housing into Cupertino. And after having the privilege of hearing directly from clients at community meetings and through my job, I found out how valuable it is to hear from people who have experienced homelessness and housing insecurity. I think the way we see housing is depicted in the media can be reductive and miss nuances in discussions we have about housing. And by hearing from and including people with lived experiences in our discussions, we can better discuss and understand housing issues with more humanity and clarity. That's all I'd like to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anusha. And our next speaker is Michael Strauss. Welcome, Michael.
Hello, thank you very much, Mayor Paul. Hello, Vice Mayor Chow and members of the City Council. I am Michael Strauss. I'm with Kimco Realty and Cupertino Village LP. We own the 99 ranch anchored Cupertino Village property on North Wolf across from Apple Park. Our shopping center is referred to in the draft housing element materials as Area A, the North Valco Park area. Wanted to comment that some have suggested that retail properties should be eliminated from the inventory list to preserve the city's retail inventory. We wanted to clarify and comment that we are a retail REIT, so retail is and will remain our core use at Cupertino Village, and also to note that our plan concept accomplishes the first 200 or 170 to 200 apartments without any displacement of small businesses or residents, and with more rather than less retail. This is accomplished by adding multifamily over a new replacement retail building with parking below. It's also contemplated in our concept that a future second phase with more retail enhancements and more residential could be implemented later during the 2023 to 2031 housing element cycle. Our housing element concept also does not impact the approved hotel at our property, and the hotel site is not included. We wanted to note that we think that retail sites are wonderful locations to add density and to add residential units. And the two uses, the retail and housing, are complementary and compatible in areas where there's infrastructure already in place. Thank you very much.
Okay, Michael, if you could hold on, I think perhaps Councilmember Woolley would like to ask a question. Councilmember Woolley?
Yeah, thank you for being so detailed, Michael. The question that I would ask is, if you're adding 200 units to that existing site and keeping the retail, since you've already kind of looked at this, can you tell us what your height would be?
Our expectation, well, thank you, Councilmember Willie, for the question. Our expectation has been that the height for the multifamily would be no taller than the 60 feet that we have assumed for the hotel, and that we believe Apple Park respected across the street. Higher is better, but that was our expectation when we put our concept together.
I'm going to cut you off there, Councilmember Woolley, in the interest of keeping everything within 3 minutes. Michael, you had a little bit of time left, and so that's the standing practice. If it's within the 3 minutes, I'll go ahead and open it up for questions from council. And so, council, if you do have those questions, though, use your Zoom function hand, and I'll go ahead and call you in there. Thank you very much. So next we have Joshua Pringle. Welcome, Joshua.
Hello, Council. My name is Joshua Pringle. I am a current resident of Cupertino. I actually live in Vista Village, which is ran by West Valley Community Services. I just want to give some insight, on the whole affordable housing situation here in Cupertino. I've been living at Vista Village for the past 8 years. Have no issues here whatsoever. No issues in the city of Cupertino as a whole. The process was kind of difficult because at the time I was homeless and I was staying in a THU unit, which was also ran by West Valley. And it took a couple months before a caseworker showed up to the house, and then just talked to everybody in the unit. Everybody was going over income limits and stuff like that. And eventually, me and my roommate eventually moved in back in April of 2014. The whole, to me, application process, just when it comes to just renting an affordable housing unit, I really think that needs to be changed. Because the reason why I said it is because I live in, of course, an affordable housing unit now, and it's helped me out a lot because of how low my rent is. I'm able to save more money for just emergencies or just other things. And I just wish it was solely just based on just income and not so much the other things like good credit, because that was the only thing that was really holding me back, because I made enough money to afford the housing, but they would turn me down just because of credit. And so I would like to see a change in that, and also just more affordable housing, just for families in general in the city. I don't think we have enough of that. So I'm glad this meeting came about. And and I thank you for actually, having this plan to build more housing here in the city. Because I do love the city a lot. I have no issues here. It's a safe environment. I live with a roommate, so and I've loved it ever since. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Joshua. And next we have Kylie Clark. Welcome, Kylie. And I actually have two raised hands from Kylie Clark. So let me go to Govind Tadachari. Govind?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, dear Mayor, council members, the new city manager, city attorney and the city clerk. I'm going to read a mail which was sent by Peggy Griffin. I'm doing this on her behalf. She is away from the station, so she's not able to join. She doesn't have access to internet. So let me just read. I'll be unable to attend Monday and Tuesday night's meeting, but strongly request that you do the following. Distribute the sites equitably across the city. Preserve our neighborhood commercial centers. Find old office buildings instead. When our density increases, the need for these retail centers will increase substantially. We need them to enable our city to thrive and make it walkable from homes nearby. Do not put our neighborhood commercial centers on the chopping block. If you pick these sites, require that the first floor be 80% of the total existing square footage retail, and that at a minimum, there's at least as much retail square footage as exists today, right now. Right now, the center at the center at South Blaney and Prospect is on the list. The center at Homestead Road and Stelling is on the list. Recently, we have lost the center at Foothill Expressway and Stevens Creek due to staff. The center at Foothill and McLean has been reduced significantly. Remember, any housing element site is then eligible to be an SB 35 site. Make sure the sites you pick can reasonably handle an SB 35 project. Remember, the 30 dwelling units per acre is the minimum density the SCD considers possible for sites that might have affordable housing. That's why the push for 30 dwelling units per acre, but not every site is capable of handling that density. Please be reasonable. Sincerely, Peggy Griffin. And I would like to add, I would like to welcome our new city manager, and also I thank you for the time that you have given to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Govind. Next, we do have that second hand by Kylie Clark. And so, Kylie, if you're different from the first speaker, then feel free to give your remarks.
Hi, thank you so much. Sorry, I don't know what that mix-up was, but this is the real Kylie Clark. I'm the Public Policy Coordinator at West Valley Community Services. And we have a couple of folks with lived experience here who I'm excited that you're getting to hear from. So I just want to thank you so much for your hard work and dedication as you work to build more housing in Cupertino, and also to encourage you to give extra weight to these voices of people who are actually impacted by the housing crisis. As you know, there's a massive housing shortage in the city, and we now have the opportunity to decide where this much needed housing will go. So thank you for including the voices of the community in these decisions. It's been really great having West Valley Community Services work with the city to include our clients and other community members in the process. And thank you to the council for your support as we've done this. And I look forward to seeing which sites you move forward with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kylie. And our next speaker, I have Mayor Dundon in my notes. Oh, yes, hand raised from Mayor. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, council members. I am one of those people that has lived experience. I am a Cupertino resident. My name is Mayor Dundon. I am a person with disabilities, and I also live in below market rate housing. It's been a very huge privilege for me to do so. And it did take me 3 years of continuously applying each year to qualify for that below market rate housing. At the time, and I believe still now, there is no below market rate housing that is accessible. So I would just ask that we continue to be aware that there's a huge need from several directions, people with disabilities, but also seniors. So in terms of having specific senior housing and specific accessibility needs met by some of the housing that we are producing. I also am a member of the community here and speak with a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. And I would just point out that these communities are very vibrant. it really does benefit us to have people of many different classes and capacities within the communities, because they become quite fierce about how they participate in their community. And that is incredibly valuable so that our cities don't die. So as we're working through all of the specific sites and we're being careful about the traffic and all of the other issues that we're balancing here, I do just want to continue to have us being clear that having a diverse community does actually make us more vibrant and alive. And we are definitely missing any of the middle housing. So in having these affordable housing sites, I often hear that people are talking about all the problems that it brings. I want to say from lived experience that is not my experience, that people are very fiercely for their city and will benefit the cities and all that they offer. And so I am looking forward to hearing more about the sites that are affordable and accessible. So thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to the continuation of this process.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I did have a hand raised from Scott Connolly before, but the hand is no longer raised, and so I will go on to Rhoda Fry. Welcome, Rhoda.
Good afternoon, good evening, council members. Just wanted to address a couple of things. I'd really like to, as the Cupertino grows, I'd like to do what we can to retain our community values, which does include diversity, but also retains Cupertino as a great place to live, work, shop, and play. So I want to talk a little bit about protecting our tax revenue. So looking at the current budget, we get about $30 million in property taxes. And I would like to see the new housing, if possible, be owner occupied. There's two reasons for that, as much as possible. Owner occupied residences or residents tend to be more engaged in their community. So I'd like to see owner occupied for that reason. Another reason to have owner occupied residents is because those housing units tend to turn over more quickly, and consequently the property tax will continue to rise, whereas rental properties the property tax can stay relatively stagnant for generations. So see if we can do more focus on getting a high amount of owner occupied housing. The other one also has to do with income to the city, which preserves our community values, is sales tax. Now, for the most recent budget, we get about $40 million in sales tax. And by my estimate, about half of that, maybe 20 million, is coming from Apple. And I think of that as sort of bonus money, because that money is coming from, a lot of that money is coming from online purchases all over the state of California. So when Apple products are purchased online, it is as though those products had been purchased in Cupertino. And we get 65% of that revenue, and Apple actually gets 35% of it. So we need to do what we can to protect our sales tax revenue, which means to protect our commercial centers, so it continues to make Cupertino a great place to live, work, shop, and play. We are continuing, as Govin mentioned per Peggy's commentary, we have been losing our commercial centers. We've been losing our neighborhood commercial centers, and that means we can't walk to shop. And it's leading to the destruction of our community and making it so that Cupertino isn't as great a place to live anymore. So I thank you very much. and let's do what we can to protect our revenue to the city through property tax and sales tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhoda. And that is our last speaker. We don't have any further hands that were up at the time that the first speaker concluded speaking at this time. We had no blue cards that had come in at that point, and no emails as well to be read into the record. And so let's go ahead and bring this back to council, and I'll go ahead and provide an allocation of 5 minutes each for any follow-ups to the public comments before we start going into each of the maps that we were looking at during the staff presentation. And so, Councilmember Moore, you have your hand up first, and so you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. So I was just wondering, because the comment about the commercial centers was brought up, were there any office-only locations within our housing element, the site selection list? That's the first question.
Okay, thanks, Councilmember Moore. Luke, you have your camera on. Did you want to speak to that question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Paul and Councilmember Moore. I believe, Pew Ghosh as planning manager with the history probably has more history with the individual sites, but I do believe we have some office and quite a few commercial properties on the housing list. With the exception of single family homes, there's very little residential on the current list.
Okay.
Because I see commercial, but I don't see the distinction with the zoning on the list that something was originally just zoned for office. So I was just curious about that.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I can try to.
Yeah, please welcome Pew Ghosh from our CDD department. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. When we were looking at the site, so historically, the city has not had any sites that are zoned exclusively, or from a land use perspective, that are used exclusively for office uses. So much of the city has a land use that allows both office and commercial uses. So I don't think if you went through our land use designations, you would find something that's only office only. You might find the one off site maybe. But in terms of the site selection process, we did go through with the Planning Commission. We went through every site. We kind of talked about what's on the site as it exists today, et cetera. I was just briefly looking after you asked the question. I believe there are at least 2 sites that I could identify that currently only have offices on them. One, I believe, is a site in the, the Farlap, Preston area. That's the North Foothill Boulevard. It's site 1C, I believe. And that one has an office building on it. And then the other one is the office building at the southwest corner of McClellan and Stelling Boulevard. Those were the 2 that I could point you to just off the cuff at this point.
Oh, okay. I was just curious about that. With regards to the Kimco site, if the city clerk, Kirsten, if you could show the one PDF slide, if you could screen share that, because I think it is a little misleading if we're going to have something which is a mixed use site. To show us the nice images from, I think it was the League of California Cities, had the nice images showing us what things will look like if they're housing at various densities. So this is a mixed use site, and we all know this is the rise before and after. Before is the previous Falco SB 35 version, and after is the current rise, and that you're looking at 48 dwelling units per acre. So that's why I'm saying it's misleading to show us those images of what 50 dwelling units per acre looks like, because if it is mixed use, it can end up like this. And if they're using a housing law, and it can be considerably different. So I think we need to be really mindful about that. So with regards to the Kimco site, hearing that the retail would be retained and that you would have, I'm presuming, residential over the retail, and at the percentages that we're asking for inclusionary housing, I think there's going to be a qualification for density bonus units on top of that, plus waivers. If I'm understanding this correctly, and perhaps someone from staff could let me know on that. And those waivers could be for height or setback, things of that nature. I want to make sure I'm understanding that correctly.
30 seconds. If it takes longer, I'll start my clock. Staff, did you want to? Luke or Pew, did you want to answer that?
Regarding the density bonus questions and waivers, those are certainly in play on all of the housing sites. So I think when we're, two things, when we're talking about housing and heights based on specific densities, we realize it is very general. If you have a mixed use commercial at the base, you're likely going to have taller buildings, because you're having a floor devoted to commercial use, and then you tend to have a higher ceiling height on that, so that pushes the overall building height up. But when we are talking about the, whether it's density or height, density bonus is not factored into that equation. And again, we don't have specific projects before us now. I think the assumption, particularly for sites 30 units per acre or 50 units per acre, we're probably going to see some type of a density bonus coming in on, I would say, nearly all of those properties. You may get a few that don't, but I would expect density bonus waivers to be requested. And if we have any other further discussion on this, I know David Massington with ELS Architecture is here. David may have something as well to add to this discussion.
Okay, real quick, if I may, through the mayor.
Sure, go ahead.
With regards to the EIR, I think that there would be a component in there where you would be looking at heights, expected heights. And I just want to point out that might be quite a challenge to guesstimate. If we're looking at a mixed use site with a density bonus added on. So do you anticipate that heights would be mentioned? I know that the previous 2014 version had some heights mentioned and some different scenarios for that as well. Thank you.
Luke, if I may.
Please, is that City Attorney Jensen?
Yes.
Please proceed.
So generally you wouldn't need to look at height to determine environmental impact. So we look at the total number of units to determine some impacts, such as air quality, but height generally would not factor into that analysis.
Okay, so thank you. I've reached the end of my time, but I did want to comment briefly on with regards to displacement. And I can understand the wish to not have displacement at this time or any other time, but as we move on to our next housing element, we are going to run out of these commercial spaces which are being utilized for the housing element process, and we will need to do infill residential development, and it's going to happen. And I personally, I would rather see it begun now for some of the older apartment units, perhaps, that a new development could happen, and that it's done in a slow and methodical way, rather than we essentially hit the wall on the available properties in our next cycle, and then we're forced to have a number of apartment buildings end up needing to be entitled.
Councilmember Moore, I'm going to stop you there because you've now utilized 3 minutes of my time. So I'm going to go ahead and go on to Vice Mayor Chow. Vice Mayor Chow.
Hi. I'd like to get an answer for one of the public's comment about the fair housing assessment. I think I have been asking for that since March. So what's the status on that? It seems, I think it's Kylie Webster. She mentioned the HCD requires us to first do the fair housing assessment and then to other parts of the housing element. First, is that true? Second, what's the status of that?
Feel free. Anyone, Andy, welcome, and Pew, not Pew, but Luke has his camera on as well.
Yes, we are doing these in parallel. We have already initiated our draft. We have gone a long way with our analysis. So we are taking into consideration AFFH as we consider these sites throughout the process. And AFFH will absolutely be prominent in our process as we move forward in discussing policy and how policy relates to these sites.
So first, is that a requirement by HCD that we should consider fair housing assessment before doing other components like housing element site?
This is an iterative process, so we have initiated our analysis, and we have initiated our draft document for that section of our draft plan. So it is happening. It is coinciding. They are happening in parallel. HCD does not require that one must be complete before the next step begins. To answer your question directly.
No, that's good to know. So you did consider the fair housing assessment in a draft form. However, now the council is asked to make decision without the knowledge of any draft fair housing assessment. That doesn't seem to be appropriate. It seems the draft should be shared with the council. So when we make decision, we do consider those, even in the draft form.
What we understand about AFFH when it comes to Cupertino is that it is the highest resource area throughout the city. So so we don't have the same kind of challenges that some other cities within California do when you consider geographical locations. So what we've done is we've begun with all possible sites that have the highest potential for redevelopment.
Let me ask, what's the timeline? When will the council see a draft housing assessment?
We're working on that project schedule with staff right now. But meanwhile, our team is building that document. So we'll have it ready soon for staff review.
Like in September, in a month?
We have goals that we're working through with staff right now, and as that gets completed, it'll be brought to.
Okay, well, I have limited time. Sorry, I have to cut you off. So I see that some of the tier 1 sites have no owner interest, but some of the tier 2 sites have owner interest. So how are decision or recommendations made that some without owner interest are in tier 1 versus, why is there a difference?
I'll try to answer that. Some of the tier 2 sites didn't meet the area requirements, for instance. They were too small, even though we had owner interest. And when we presented the sites also to the Planning Commission, their tier 1 rose to the level it did because those were the sites the commissions supported housing more so on. So it could be location, it could be the size of the tier 2 site. Owner interest alone was not something that guided. It had to show that it was a viable housing site and was supported by the commissions.
I see. So do we have, I believe we asked, we would like to see reasons of this recommendation. Do we have some kind of summary on a site that maybe the Planning Commission is recommending this site
30
or
seconds.
not the other site?
30 seconds, Vice Mayor.
Listed somewhere.
I believe it's attachment C to the staff report. There's a 2-page text that describes very briefly what the commission, what their rationale was, or why the recommendations were made, or if there were changes to the particular site. It's very brief. but that attempts to clarify why certain decisions were made.
Okay, thank you. And then I hope to clarify, with some sites who are not selected as housing element sites, for example, Canyon Crossing, could still propose project anytime during a housing element cycle, right? So what's the difference when a site is selected or not versus not selected? Not selected doesn't mean the owner cannot proceed with building the proposed project. So what difference does it make?
Okay,
for
Vice
the
Mayor, I'm going
owner?
to cut you off there because I've already ceded over about a minute of my time. I don't have much time left, but let me give you at least half of my remaining minute for the answer. Luke or Andy, can you answer that? What if it's not on the site selection housing list? Does it count?
Not being on the list does not preclude you from developing housing at all. The goal of the list is to demonstrate.
I'm sorry, hold on. I think we're aware that it doesn't preclude us from developing housing, but with regard to the housing element and the credit for those numbers, does it affect that?
You get the credit for it, yes. As you do your annual report for housing development, you would note that those units were developed.
Okay, thank you.
What we're really doing with the inventory is being able to demonstrate to HCD we can meet our RENA number. And
Got
that
it.
way you can
Okay.
certify it.
Okay. I'm going to cut you off there. So let's go ahead. And, if people want another round, but let me just give a fair opportunity for everyone to ask some questions first. So next we have Councilmember Willie and then Councilmember Way.
Okay, I'll start first, just real briefly. I'm so glad we had this continued to tonight so that we're coming at things with a focus as opposed to a huge agenda like we usually have on our council meetings. So thank you very much for doing that. Second up, Luke, thank you so much for a very nice presentation. Get us all back up to speed on this. The residents that are watching, great. Now we're focused. Now we're able to work through this. The first item I'd like to bring up is going to be with resident engagement. I did look at the attachment, that had resident responses, and I hear that there's 1,000 responses. What I really want to know, though, is really how many residents have been participating throughout this process to date. If you can give me that, that would be great. If you have a table, how many of them, how many people participated in the survey? I'm unfortunately feeling that number of 1,000 responses or comments, 1,000 comments, gives the wrong impression. If somebody takes the survey, this is the way I feel, and if I'm incorrect, by all means, correct me. If someone takes the survey and has 20 comments, it adds 20 to that number, bringing it to 1,000. So again, I want to know how many residents have been participating, how many residents are where. We sent the postcards to every household, but how many people have truly been participating in this very important process? That's the first main question. Do what you can to answer that, and then I have a second question.
I'll try to answer that quickly. I'll defer on the survey component to Andy, but we have certainly been doing a lot of notice. Our lists on our e-notifications are probably about 1,800 to 1,900 people who've registered, who are regularly receiving notifications of the process. The attendance at the meetings is not, in that range. I would say the two community meetings we had in May and July were our most heavily attended. We had about 100 people register. The May meeting was virtual, so it was hybrid at Community Hall. We probably had about 15 people present and about another 60 or 70 that participated online. The July meeting was all virtual, and we probably had about the same amount of participation, but it was all in a virtual format. So I don't have a table or specific numbers, but I know we have been trying to do all we can through our websites, social media, everything possible to try to gauge interest on this. I will defer to Andy on the survey and the question on that.
So go on, Andy.
Go ahead. Yes, we do have a separate housing survey that's available on our website right now, and we'll be tallying up the results from that. And for that, we'll have specific numbers of people who may have participated. It is true that the way that we calculated over 1,000 particular comments is that if somebody bothered to take the time to comment on more than one location, then each of those was considered a unique comment, and they've all been tallied up together with the attachment that was made available. We continue to welcome and invite as many people into the process as possible, particularly those who may not have participated in policymaking in the past.
Yeah, so I'll just say that I really hope we put in a huge effort to get people involved. I can't say that enough. When these large high-density developments start going in, residents, we do not want them to be surprised. I did meet with one of the residents that talked at a previous meeting, and who then emailed me based on my comments.
30 seconds.
And he said that Saratoga put up a sign, and after they did that, they had a huge number of residents that participated. I think we need to learn from our surrounding neighborhoods and do at least as good as them. So I'll leave it at that. I do have other questions, so I would like a second round.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Willie. And then next we have Councilmember Way.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. So my questions are for maybe whoever can answer it. One question from the residents is she would prefer owner-occupied housing, which I think is a pretty reasonable request. And how is legally that we can say we want percentage of owner-occupied, or is there a guideline to follow for the developers?
I will take a shot at that. Generally, when you're looking at zoning for housing, you're looking at things like, again, density, height, and the residential use, not the type of tenancy that you have involved. I think as you go to, generally, if you have smaller floor plans and higher density, you may get a greater likelihood that you're going to have more rental units versus owner occupied. But in terms of planning, you're generally looking at land use as residential and not going into the type of whether it's ownership or rental housing.
So it's basically the developers would probably decide how many percentage that the city really doesn't have the legal authority to demand it. If I can understand it as it is.
There are ways that the city can incentivize owner versus rental occupied housing, but yes, I think it would be difficult to legally mandate one form or the other.
Okay, thank you. And also on the mixed use, on the preserving our retail commercial opportunities, we can make it a mixed use demand or provide that guidelines, but it's up to developers whether they want to have a mixed use or only residential. I kind of like to know the legal authorities that city has.
So the city has flexibility to require things like ground floor commercial. There's no legal prohibition to that, so it's more of an economic consideration and then a consideration of density. If you add an additional floor of commercial, the same number of housing units is going to be 10 to 15 feet higher.
Okay, so for example, we zone it mixed use, but the developer comes in with just residential. Does the city have any recourse to demand more of a mixed use instead of just residential?
I think that depends on the particulars of the zoning.
Okay. So, but we can pay attention to that. So I just have one suggestion on the pipeline projects. I am very concerned about the pipeline projects. They are in the pipeline, so we have communication methods with the owners. So can we at least reach out and get a commitment letter saying that they are going to be building it in the next 8 years, so that at least we satisfy the HCD's demands. If that's possible, I think that would be good for our pipeline projects to receive a commitment letter from the owners.
Okay, well, please proceed, Luke.
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to acknowledge that we have sent letters and plan on following up because we're aware with the significant amount of pipeline units. We want to be able to demonstrate to HCD that those developers are committed to building that housing within the 8-year period.
Great. Anything
Thank
else?
you.
All right, Councilmember Boyd, thank you very much. You're at 8:40. That is actually our remaining time, other than maybe just a few seconds that I have. But let's go another round, unless you have a follow-up question, Councilmember Way, at this point. No, at this time, okay. So let's do this. It stands at 6:30. Let me do a quick poll of people with their hands raised. So we've got Vice Mayor Chow, Councilmember Willie, Councilmember Moore. Do you think another 3 minutes would do it, or are you thinking a little bit more time for your initial questions here? And so let's start with, since we started with Councilmember Moore, let's start with Councilmember Moore. Don't go into the questions. Just, do you think about 3 minutes would do it?
Could you clarify, Mayor Paul, what you're expecting to have after these initial questions?
Yes, I'm expecting us to go through the map by map exercise that was laid out by staff at the presentation. So at this time, this is initial questions, generalized initial questions.
Okay, so we'll get more chances to ask as we move through.
Yes,
so
there will be abundant chances to ask, at least 8, hopefully, this evening for each of the maps.
Okay, and did you have a time that you were hoping to wrap up this evening? Are we going to midnight or?
Yes, I'm having the same stop at midnight that I've had for the duration of this year and the previous year, last year.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. So 3 minutes is good, Councilmember Moore. Vice Mayor Chow, are you in agreement with that? Would 3 minutes do it for you?
Well, short, but yeah, let's do it.
Okay, and Councilmember Willie.
I'll do my best.
You'll do your best. All right. Okay. Well, Councilmember Willie, your hand's still raised, but I'm going to assume that you'll stay within the time. All right. I'm not ceding over any time this time, so let me have Councilmember Moore take the dais. Councilmember Moore, you have the floor, but let me, since your camera's not on, your camera's back.
Yeah, pardon. I was actually after the vice mayor. My hand was raised after hers.
Oh, I was just going by order of our first cycle, but I'm happy to call on Vice Mayor.
I think I just forgot to put it down, so you can go first.
Okay, that's fine. I was looking at, in hearing this concern about the pipeline projects and looking at this, there's a newsletter someone puts out. And I would like to hear what the city has to say about the RISE project and what's going on with that. I think that's probably the biggest question people have. And what is your understanding from the developer? I have seen the GeoTracker reports that are coming through. What is your understanding from the developer about their intention to move forward with that particular project? I do recall in 2018, there was a time estimate of 6 to 8 years. And there was a different project with an EIR that studied a 10-year timeline. But verbally, a member of the developers teams said something like 6 to 8 years for that. So there's some comment about what their intentions are. I'd love to hear that. Thank you.
I see City Attorney Jensen is reaching for his mic button.
Yeah, I'll address that question to the extent we can. So, so for purposes of this exercise, we have every reason to believe that project is moving forward, and we are going to provide evidence to HCD that it will be likely to be completed within the 6-cycle time period by 2031. So, so that's, I think that's what we can say about it tonight for purposes of this exercise. And I'm certainly able to have a broader discussion of it with any council member that would like to, but that really hasn't been agendized tonight.
Okay. Through the mayor, if I may ask this question, it's
still your floor. You still have about a minute and a half left.
Is there anything that the city is doing which is slowing that project down?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Councilmember Moore. That's a minute 40 in your time. Let's go on to Vice Mayor Chow.
Okay, thank you. So for the future, could we please add, in addition to the units per acre that's zoned for, also the units for density bonus, that's 35%, for in the interest of transparency, especially since I think Luke mentioned likely all the projects will request density bonus. So I think then this way the public would know, here's what it's zoned for, but here's what it will actually be built for. Then people would have transparency on what exactly a site will be built for. And then one public comment mentioned about more affordable housing for families. I think we have seen quite a lot of affordable housing, but then they tend to come in for seniors or in steel deals or 1 bedroom, but affordable housing for 2 or 3 bedrooms, we tend to get the developer will ask for concession. As a result, even our BMR menu requests comparable unit size and unit type, they get exception on that. So maybe this is not the topic of this discussion, but I think in our housing policies, we need to need to have policies to ensure that they cannot take exception on our requirement to provide bigger, affordable, below market rate units. And for the Kinko site, I do wonder if the current developer has interest of redevelop only 1 building of the entire site. Is it possible we only zone a portion of the site for residential at the density that they request, rather than at the entire site? Because as we know, property could change hands. The next developer could come in and say, I want to apply this density for the entire site, and then we lose all the retail. So I'm just wondering whether it's possible to zone a specific portion of a site for certain density.
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Anyone on staff want to answer that question regarding partial rezoning of a site? Luke.
Well, you could zone a portion of a site or an individual property at a different density. That can be done. For that site, we believe what was recommended was appropriate. I believe the hotel property was taken out of the site, with the remainder being eligible for housing development. But if the council chooses to focus zoning or particular density on a property, that certainly could be your decision.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't quite get an answer for my earlier question. What difference does it make for a property owner or an applicant whether a site is selected as housing element site versus not? What difference does it make in terms of the laws they have to comply with, or it doesn't make a difference to them, except that now they have a.
Okay, let's wrap up that question, and that's fine. I'll cede you some time. You're at 3:50 right now, but let's go ahead. Luke, can you answer that question in say half a minute or so?
Yeah, I'll try to do it very briefly. If you're a housing element site, one benefit you would get, say, is you are on the city's list, identified as a housing element site. We would be doing an environmental impact report analyzing housing development on that property. So you would get the benefit as a property owner, if you're interested in building housing, of having the city having done that work, so to speak. It doesn't mean other sites can't be developed for housing, but once a site is identified for housing, the city's making a certain commitment that that's what will be built on that property.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off. Vice Mayor Chow, I'm cutting you off. Let's go, Councilmember Woolley.
Great, thank you very much. So we know what we must do. That's not an issue here. I'd like to share my screen and just kind of share some things. You know, resident engagement, hopefully my screen is up there.
It is, yes. We can see.
Yeah, this is the Saratoga sign. And the size of Cupertino, I think we need one of these on West Stevens Creek, East Stevens Creek. I think we need South De Anza Boulevard, North De Anza Boulevard, and one on Homestead. I just leave it at that. We need the community to be aware of what's going on and be a part of the process. Next thing that I will pull up here. So Bub Road is supposedly tomorrow night, but I don't see what I'm after onto the Bub Road, so I'd like to point it out. Hopefully city staff would do a little bit of research. I've driven Bub Road a lot, taking my kids to Kennedy for sports, Kennedy School. All these office buildings here, I think, really need to be looked at hard. We're going to gain almost 2 million square feet of office at Valco. Here's all this office building. A lot of it is very old. It's next to the freeway and it's next to the railroad tracks, and it's not abutting houses directly. So here is prime high density locations. I'd like to know how many acres, how many parcels, how the owners were notified, and to what degree did we really go to talk to them. And I'll just say that it sure seems to me there's going to be multiple owners. Even if one of them is interested and says, gee whiz, I'll put high density, that'll conceivably spur other owners to say, wow, we can do this too. But if we leave it totally dark, nothing's going to happen. And I think this is a site. I think we need to be equitable around the city. When we start talking 50 units per acre,
30
and
seconds.
that high of a density, and yet leaving areas that could handle high density untouched, I think we really need to look at that. And please do some research and let us know tomorrow night, if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Woolley. Let's go on to Councilmember Way, if you have any follow-ons at this time.
Just a couple comments. I actually have been following with all the commission meetings, listening in on how they decided on the housing sites. They did go through each site, even though I thought the discussion were a little bit random, but I think that is how we got the recommendations. I do think some of the tier 2 sites that our council can really consider it seriously, especially the ones that the owners are willing to be considered. So I think we have an opportunity to do that. That's one comment. The second comment is back to the pipeline projects. I do believe that we need to carefully looking at more units to substantiate the pipeline project, just in case the pipeline projects don't pan out, that we see letter from the owners that we're not interested in building it. So that's another comment, and for my fellow council members, that we should look at a few tier 2 projects, maybe add more choices to our tier 1 choice. That's just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Way. You were right at 1 minute of your time there. Let me utilize my 90 seconds here. Quick question. So we had a real estate discussion last Thursday about acquiring potential property, and we're considering it for affordable housing. Very briefly, if that gets acquired, it is not on a tier 1 or a tier 2 list here. Just to reiterate, that does eventually count if it comes within the cycle. Is that correct, or is that not correct? Because it is not under consideration. It's an office building right now. Andy, your thumb is up, which I take to mean a good thing. And would you care to elaborate on that gesture?
Yes. So we're showing capacity for RENA, but whatever gets built is what gets counted for RENA.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to unjustifiably toot, but we're also, I think, leading the way and showing that we're serious about, putting our dollar where our considerations are. Would you say that that's a fair statement?
That's fantastic.
Okay,
yes,
wonderful.
I agree.
Okay, I've got 30 seconds. I want to just get really quickly on these pipeline projects. I thought we had dealt with this last time, and I think that from a legal perspective, if you have a pipeline project, and certainly from an ethical perspective, if state legislation was lobbied for and passed, and you end up having a project like SB 35, is there any reason to think that that pipeline project, if there's intention to build and a stated intention to build, should not and would not count as part of your arena housing allocation? Mr. City Attorney Jensen?
No, so HCD guidance expressly recognizes that pipeline projects, both projects that have been entitled and projects that are at other phases of the development project, can count. And as we've discussed multiple times, as you point out, that there has to be a showing that the project is likely to be built within the planning period. So
right.
we will provide evidence to HCD of that. There have been some comments received, for example, by San Francisco, asking them to provide additional evidence as part of their housing element project. I think that's an excellent roadmap for us to look at as we move forward.
Agreed. But we shouldn't twist that to make it such that the misrepresentation that's out there that San Francisco got rejected because it's a pipeline project is actually valid. That's not valid, correct?
Well, just like every other jurisdiction that's gone through this process recently in the state, San Francisco got a number of comments from HCD on their first draft housing element, and they have room to improve. There's nothing unique about San Francisco in that regard. Every city that's submitted a housing element in the past several years has gone through that process.
Right, and as you and I know, as good attorneys, and I know you're our city attorney, but as good attorneys, there are standards of evidence, and just because you say something is evidence doesn't actually make it evidence. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's fair. But we'll obviously work with HCD to provide the kind of evidence that they're looking for. But I think. Again, it's not unusual to get these kind of comments on the first round of your housing element.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. City Attorney. And so let's go ahead and bring this back to either Councilmember Way or Councilmember Moore. You are the ones that have some remaining time. Councilmember Moore, you have about 1:20. And John, Councilmember Willie, you have about 10 seconds if you wanted to do a real quick one. And Councilmember Way, you've been quite efficient with your time as well. I clock you in as about 3 more minutes in total. Unless we want to do a third round. So Councilmember Moore, let's go to you. Did you want to follow on at this time?
Sure. I would like to have an updated table LU1. The one in the previous general plan is showing that citywide we have available about 799,000 square feet of commercial still available and 553 or 54,000 square feet of office still available. And to your point, and I don't know that if you want to hear this, but it is rather, I think absurd might be the right word, but it's rather absurd that we're having to essentially take a kind of an assertive posture with regards to the Valco project to ensure to HCD that we are going to have a project which will worsen the housing shortage while using a housing law, that we need to ensure that it get built. And I maybe there's a better word than absurd, but it sure feels that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Moore. And so let me take this to Councilmember Wade. Did you have any follow-ons at this time?
Yes. Just one question, and maybe how do we go about and do this? I understand we are short of the very low income housing for 833 units and the moderate income for 655. So when we are doing our housing elements, how do we ensure the properties we either zone or choose satisfy that numbers? When we say below market rate, can we tell the developers or that site, say we need this many low income, this many moderate, because that's what we need? Or if they want to do low income, we could already satisfy that number. How do we go about doing that?
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Way, for that question. I do see Andy with a camera on. Chris is here. Andy, did you want to address that question?
I can let Chris start.
Okay.
And he may do.
Yeah, I'll do my best, and Andy should definitely jump in because I think this is his area of expertise. So, I mean, this is something, we can't necessarily zone properties for very low income or moderate income development. However, we can develop policies that encourage that kind of development, and that's going to be one of the next stages of the process. The Housing Commission and eventually Council will weigh in on our housing element policies. And Andy, you should feel free to provide more detail if you're able to do so.
Thanks, Chris. Andy, any follow-ups?
Well said. I don't have anything to add at this moment, but we look forward to that process.
Okay, great. Anything else, Councilmember Willie? Okay, great. So, Councilmember Willie, you have a brief moment. Did you want to?
10 seconds. Okay. So, for the city attorney, I like the concept of for sale versus apartments. Can we make it so that the density, if it were apartments, is 25 DUs, and if it was for sale units, was 35 DUs? Is that something we could do?
That's something that would be unusual. I would have to look into that to see if that were feasible. So, but that would certainly be unusual.
Could you look into it, though? Thank you.
Yes. Yes, I can do that.
Great. Thanks very much. Folks, we're at 6:51 on an official computer clock time, which I am assuming is syncing with everyone else's. So let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. We will reconvene at 6:57. And then at that time, we'll go into the maps. And again, if you're looking at the presentations on the city website and all the materials, it was slide number 29, page 15, if you're looking at the longer list or the comprehensive list of all the various sites that we're looking at. Okay, we'll see you in about 5 minutes. Thanks. So we are going to go ahead and proceed in the map evaluation part of this presentation and exercise. Just to catch everyone back up, this is item number 2 on our special meeting agenda tonight. We've had the staff presentation. There have been comments from members of the public on this item, and we've had a couple of rounds of council questions and comments. Right now at this time, I'm going to return this to Luke Connolly of our Community Development Department. Luke, thanks for providing a great presentation this evening. And did you want to start us off on the map by map evaluation exercise?
Yes, Mayor Paul, I should have that up again shortly.
Great.
Okay. Okay. We'll go back. This, just as a refresher, this was the citywide map that shows all of the areas, and we're going to go through the first 8 area maps, starting just north of Valco on the upper right there. So I'll go to the next slide. Okay, this is the area that we're talking about. And you have the site 26A, which is made up of several properties, Cupertino Village. That is the only tier 1 site. As I indicated, it has owner interest on it and is shown at a 30 unit per acre recommended density for that entire site. And I don't know if we want to get into additional questions too. Again, we have Andy, David Massington, and I believe Pew also. We would have other capabilities to go in and look at the site in different dimensions. If if we want to, if there are any questions on this, we could just open it up to that. However, would be the most efficient way to proceed.
Yes, that sounds good. So let's do this, Luke. I have hands up from council, and let me do a quick calculation here. So we have about 5 hours left, 8 sites to get through. Allocation roughly, half an hour. Let's go ahead and provide 3 minutes per council member at this time. And so I don't know what the order was, but I think it may have been Councilmember Willie, Councilmember Moore, and then Councilmember Way of the hands that are raised. Does that sound about right to you all? Councilmember Willie, you're shaking your head. Do you not want to go first on this one? Okay, so that was probably from before. Councilmember Moore, why don't you start us off with questions of staff as to map A?
Okay. So what I would like to see on this table would be actually the total, the acreage that we have at that site, and the total total units. When I'm looking at the recommended sites inventory, I don't know what attachment this one is. There you're showing 30 dwelling units per acre as the target density. So I don't know if this was if there was a subtotal even for this particular site. Could somebody answer that? And then I think moving forward for the next night, if we could have the target density with a total for the entire site, that would be very helpful. But if someone could let me know what the total is you're expecting at this location, because I've got several different attachments that I'm trying to work with, that would be helpful.
Great, thank you for that question, Councilmember Moore. So I see Pew, you have your camera on. Did you want to speak to that?
I believe for this particular site, there's 323 units that are indicated in attachment B.
I can add to that it's 10.77 acres.
Okay, and Councilmember Moore, did you have any follow-on to that?
No, not at this time. But I do want to just reiterate what I'd said earlier, which was with regards to the request to have this maintained as mixed use with the retail at this location. That the height that we're looking at that's aspirational, perhaps is a good one for that. But it would end up being quite a bit taller. And I'm wondering when this estimate of this 35-foot height was made, was there an expectation that there was going to be some open space, parkland at this particular location? So, I mean, we could do a pretty quick calculation if you did the 300 and what was it, maybe 320 some odd dwelling units. I don't know what multiplier you're using, if it's a 2.83 or a 2.9 multiplier residents per unit. You can come up with the total number of residents and then work out your parkland dedication requirement for that particular site.
30 seconds.
So how far down the road did you work this out to come up with that target height, given that we have a parkland requirement and you would have ground floor retail? Thank you.
Briefly, anyone?
So I can try to briefly address that. So, sure. I mean, the parkland dedication ordinance, I mean, that does not apply to our site dedication. There are open space requirements in our zoning ordinance, and presumably there would be for the zoning on this site. I would say that this is just a general question of, generally applicable to all the sites that we're discussing today, that when we get into zoning, there will be things like there will be a trade-off between things like height and open space, and it will ultimately be up to council to make that trade-off.
Okay, great. So that's about 3.5. I'll just cede over half a minute of my time. Councilmember Way, you're the next person with a hand raised. And so did you want to follow on this map A?
Yes, to follow up that Councilmember Moore's question. So our zoning ordinances apply to every site, right?
Yes, applies everywhere in the city.
Okay, so parkland dedication, traffic mitigation, that's all should be included. My question for this site is, we did receive a letter from the owner, and it says it's going to be a mixed use. My question for this site is, I do think it's a great location because it is very close to Apple campus, it's close to North, to the workplace. It's on the target height. If I remember clearly, or I hope it's not a mistake, the staff did say when we're doing 30 units per acre, the height average is like 45. Why are we putting 35, or did I hear it wrong?
Yes, I just jump in. This actually should be reflected as a 45-foot height. The 35-foot height on the table that's listed at 30 dwellings per acre, that's understating what would typically be needed. You might be able to do 30 units per acre and 35 feet, but it would be tough. 45 feet would be the recommended height at 30 units per acre, and the 65-foot height for 50 units per acre. And David, I see your camera's on if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I was just going to add generally to sort of follow up with Councilmember Moore's comment as well. These sites haven't been designed out, but the open space, would be provided in any of these projects. I think the height that we're looking at, as Luke is saying, would probably be about 45 feet with the assumption there'd be some ground floor retail. But, the biggest impact on sort of the viability of these sites oftentimes is how the parking is handled and what the parking is required.
Okay, so just one quick follow-up. So
Sure,
why are we putting target height 35 feet?
It should be 45.
Okay.
I just want to clarify that's a mistake. I would say 45 should be pretty uniformly applied to the 30 dwelling units per acre, and particularly where you have a mixed use site, 35 feet would not work.
Okay.
But we would like to say generally though that it's dependent on the unit size and the unit mix, which that's not part of this process. This process is somewhat conceptual in nature.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilmember Way. 2:20, 40 seconds left. And so next we have any other Councilmember Willie or Vice Mayor Chow? Vice Mayor Chow?
Thank you. I think I forgot to really thank the staff for this very comprehensive presentation. It's really more than what I had expected. I really appreciate it. It's really giving us enough background information and organizing information in a way that's more easy to understand. However, I am confused about this particular slide. We see that there is 26A, but then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different addresses. So these are all, there are multiple 6 parcels on the 26A site.
Yes, that
right?
is correct.
And then what is the acreage, total acreage? I couldn't find that. Is that in attachment E where you have a description for each site? I see some sites you do have acreage listed. Is there like a table of all the sites with their acreage?
The total acreage for this site is 10.77 acres.
Okay, so is there a table where we can easily get the acreage for each of the site?
We have a table that includes all of the individual acreages, and we can make that available even by tomorrow night.
Oh, not in the attachment right now.
Correct.
I do see attachment E has some acreage for some sites, but I have to read through the text to find. Okay, and then that would be great. I think it's important to have acreage when we talk about units per acre. Then when we are talking about the total units, are we talking the total units 25 per acre for the entire site to accommodate the proposed what's the total unit? Total units. But here you have 6 sites, 6 parcels. They each have some units listed, but then my understanding is not all of them will be redeveloped. That only one building will be redeveloped. So
30 seconds.
I'm confused. Which one of these is the one that has a building that the owner intends to redevelop?
Any insights there, Luke?
Yeah, if I could just try to answer that again. I mean, we're really tailoring the housing element again, not to any one specific building, but to looking at this as all of these 6 properties are under common ownership. So we treated it really as one site, and that they would have the potential to add or develop housing over the 8-year time period. So we are treating it essentially as a site that happens to be comprised of multiple parcels, as many of these sites are. And the 30 units per acre that's shown is applied evenly over the site. So it's a very general way of doing it at this point in time. So I think like some of the very specific questions, even things related to open space, we're not at that level of detail right now.
Wait, but the owner specifically said he doesn't intend to develop the entire site. He only intends to develop one building. So where is that building? On which parcel that particular building he intends to redevelop sits?
Pew, did you want to answer that?
And how big is that?
Through the mayor, if I may.
Yes, please. And
area.
let's just set the expectation here. Answer this question, and then we'll go on to Councilmember Woolley if he cares to comment, and then I'll go ahead and ask my questions.
Sure. If I may share my screen, Mr. Mayor?
Please, go ahead.
So my understanding, based on discussions with the property owners, is that the parcel outlined in the teal right here has the building that he wishes to demolish and relocate to the corner up on the northeast side. That is my understanding, and that has the Ranch 99 Ranch grocery store in it, and that is going to be relocated in a mixed-use building in the northeast corner of the site. In order to do that, there is no clear way for us to demarcate the densities. Currently, there are 6 parcels. There's one at the corner. There's a common parcel that kind of encompasses the building. And then there are 4 additional parcels that encompass 4 different commercial buildings.
Okay, Pew, let me cut you off there. And just with about a minute left of my time, I started my clock a couple minutes ago. Let me go to Councilmember Woolley. Did you want to ask any questions or make comments on this site? Okay. Yeah, Pew, go ahead and put that map back up. I'll just, utilize my first round time here. So with regard to the 30 dwelling units per acre, I think it's understood that the 35-foot height limit that was just a across the board typo. Is that right? 45 is what we should be considering, just to reiterate that?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So, so based upon the comments here, it's sounding like 30 dwelling units per acre, which again is the legal requirement for making some assumptions about what? About very low income or low income or
low and is presumptively suitable for very low and low income development.
Okay, great. So that's correct, right?
That's correct.
Okay, presumptively suitable for low and very low. And so with regard to what we're looking at here on the map, Pew, what you're saying is that they're looking to relocate the 99 Ranch Market, but we don't really have clarity as to the entirety of the project, right? I mean, you're not going to have it until they submit a project. Is that correct?
Correct, that is right. And if there is a way where, we could establish that they're going to do whatever density they wish to do in that northeast corner, we can look to set that number rather than have it be 30 dwelling units.
Well, let me ask another question. So with regard to a height expectation, okay, wouldn't it be, and Pew, Andy, Luke, Chris, Pamela, anyone, if you want to answer this question, that's fine. Is it fairly valid to say that if a unit is smaller, it is likely to be more affordable?
I think generally that's the case. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
no solid rule, but absolutely.
I mean, so really that adheres to our aims here, right? I mean, if you're trying to stay within a particular height limitation and the size of a unit is an issue in terms of expense, then a smaller unit will generally be more affordable. I mean, I don't mean to make this like some kind of self-evident statement, but just to reiterate it, that's probably right?
Yes.
Okay, Andy, I'm going to take your nod as a reiteration of that. So let's go on. Councilmember Woolley, you have your hand, you're signaling at this time. Would you like to ask some questions or make some comments here?
Yeah, I did have a question. If you could put the map back up. I'm always focused on the impact to the adjacent, the map that you just had back up. And the question being, okay, so you've got a little bit of insight that the developer wants to move that building out to the sidewalk. What are the current setbacks, and is there a building plane requirement?
So currently, Councilmember Woolley, there are setback requirements and building plane requirements. all of that does need to be evaluated to make sure that what they wish to build can be built. And in general, if we do set rules that do not allow them to build what we tell them they could build potentially, then they are able to use density bonus waivers and other tools that state law does allow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Councilmember Woolley. That was about 45 seconds. So let's go ahead. Councilmember Woolley, are you willing to cede any time over if we're kind of distributing time on this? All right, so let's go back to Councilmember Moore, and Vice Mayor Chow has a hand still raised. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. Okay, I remember this particular site area when it came to the ERC a couple of years ago for the hotel approval, and there was a dry cleaner that had been on the site, and I'm at the Envirostore site right now, and I'm a little concerned because they did they tested to commercial goals, as they say, and I'd like our staff to make some comments on the progress with the PCE cleanup that they're doing there. I remember at the time one of the reports indicated that there had been some intrusion into the Good Samaritan site from the PCE. So I'm wondering what the current status is, if someone's gone through these reports, because now we're looking at, and my concern before was regarding the hotel.
About a minute left of Councilmember Woolley's time. So
okay.
If we want to move that to staff for an answer.
Or is there, do we have an update on?
Yes, update on the PCE contamination. Anyone?
Cleanup, yeah.
I can attempt to try.
Yes, please do.
So we do not have an update on necessarily on the status of that environmental cleanup, but that is all. They're all very good questions and will be evaluated with both the environmental review that is going to be conducted and with any future development projects. We do have regulations in place that will require cleanup of the site to residential levels before residential uses can be placed on them.
Okay, let's go ahead and very, very briefly, Vice Mayor Chow, did you have any questions or comments on this?
Just I would like to request to add acreage to the presentation. That would be really helpful.
Okay, I think that was noted. Staff, was that noted with regard to acreage? And Andy, you had indicated that could be done overnight. Okay, great. Thumbs up from Andy.
Thank you.
All right, great. All right, so I think we've pretty much exhausted time here. Councilmember Wade, you have a few seconds left. You don't want? Are you willing to cede that time over to Councilmember Moore? Councilmember Moore, you still have your hand up. Did you want to follow up?
Yes, I just want to point out that the most recent report on the PCE contamination is August 12th of this year. So it's very, very recent reporting news. So I think we should be looking at it before we make our choices. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilmember Moore. And again, we're probably going to take an omnibus motion at the end of this, and so I hope everyone's taking notes. We're on map A. Let's at this time move over to map B. Would anyone like to get us to the next map? And it looks like is this map C?
I think it's Simeon property.
Right. So, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my own file. So if anyone would like to move us to map B. Great. All right, and Luke, did you want to give a brief overview, or anyone from staff, Andy, with regard to this map?
Yeah, I could just jump in. Yes, there's really one site here, 24A, which I believe is commonly known as the Simeon site. It's currently undeveloped. It's immediately north of where the former Valco Mall was at, just south of 280. This is, unlike the previous site, was 30 units per acre. This is listed at 50. We have owner interest on this as well. And I believe the feeling has been that this might make a good affordable housing site, just given its location. So that's really all I have to add. It is the only site on this map. So I am happy to turn this over for discussion.
Okay, same as the prior map, we'll go ahead and allocate 3 minutes each. And would anyone like to start us off? I don't see any hands here. Councilmember Way, your hand's raised.
Yes, I want to ask a couple of general questions. So when we define the how many units per acre, does the developer or owner have the privilege or right to develop less? Say if we say 50 per acre and they said we just want to do 40 per acre, is that?
Yeah, that's a minimum from what I understand, but I think a number of people can answer that. Chris, did you want to answer that?
So I believe I will defer to planning staff, but I believe the numbers that you're looking at are minimum densities.
Right. Okay, so Pew, your camera's now on. Or Luke, did you want to address that?
I could. We have thought about most planning land use development standards have a range. I think what staff has looked at for these densities, we're using the term minimum because that's what HCD wants to see, but we've also thought about it as a target density. So I believe the recommendation would really be that if we have a range, it's a very tight range. So something maybe say like 45 to 50 for something that's a 50 unit site. So it's certainly conceivable if the council would want to have the ability to go below the minimum density. But again, you really want to be able to hit those numbers so you can demonstrate to HCD that that number of units can actually be realized on the property.
Okay, thank you. So we say minimum, is also our maximum, I guess, because we usually do not like to go over that. Is that an accurate description or assumption?
Yeah, I think if you had a tight range, like I said, something like a range of about 10 units. So something where it's difficult to specify an exact number without a range, but it would mean you could go slightly over or slightly under. I believe that is the thinking at this time. There's nothing, there's no document or anything saying that we've established this, but that's been the staff's thinking as we go through this to make sure the density is really hitting our target.
Okay, thank you. Another question is when we following up with Councilmember Moore's question on cleanup, there is regulation agencies that can monitor that. My question is on our EIR, are we going to have that investigated already, or is it going to be when the developer comes or owner comes with the project?
I think in a sense it would be both, because this is going to be what's called a program level EIR, where you're going to have as much information about the sites as you can disclose at any particular time. But for a site that, say, has a potential contamination issue,
30 seconds.
It could certainly involve further environmental work when there's a development application on file. So the expectation would be that these housing sites, when they become actual projects, could tier off of the program EIR, but they certainly may have to do additional work to develop the site.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great, and that's time. Let's go to Councilmember Moore, followed by Vice Mayor Chow.
Mayor Paul, this is just a procedural question.
Yes.
I don't recall us going to the public on site 26, and I was wondering if you wanted to go back and do that before we get, because our focus is on the individual sites, then we move on to the next one. I'm just a little worried that our train of thought, or at least mine, isn't gonna follow through if we're bouncing back to the project and having a group of comments from the public all at once at the end. So I was just wondering what your plan is.
My plan was to follow the stated outline that we placed on, I believe, I want to say slide 28, if anyone wants to back up to slide 28 to take a look. The public comment came after the presentation. And so after maps A through H, I believe that we were going to take another round of public commentary if time allowed for that. Okay. Oh, no need to go back. I think we get it now. So thank you, whoever's controlling the slide deck. Okay, so Councilmember Moore, let's go ahead and start your time on these follow-ons. I'm sorry, you muted yourself.
Okay. So I am a little also concerned about the lack of a sound wall on the north of this particular property. So when we're looking at an EIR, I'm going to assume that will be analyzed. The lack of a sound wall and the proximity to the freeway, whether or not we would have any kind of recommendation to be 500 feet or more from the freeway. Thank you.
Yes, anyone want to address the sound wall question here?
I can attempt to answer that.
Okay,
the EIR will probably be looking at it at a programmatic level, and will also be making recommendations with regard to whether any development will be able to meet our regulations of the 45, I think it's called CNEL, the decibel limit CNEL, which is the community noise level inside the unit. So there will be mitigations, whether there's a sound wall, whether there's triple or quadruple paned windows, or whatever those things are. So we'll have those mitigations factored in.
Okay, anything else, Councilmember Moore? No? Okay. So you're at 1 minute of your time. Let's go to Vice Mayor Chow.
Not particular about this site. I just want to clarify. Staff mentioned earlier they can get ready is a table with acreage, but then I was requesting we should have average of each slide. That's for easy access, and also I would like acreage and the units per acre for pipeline sites too, so that we have comparison, know what's already there. Thank you.
Okay, multiple requests there.
A table will be at a minimum. That would be great, but it would be nice if it could be added to individual slides, then we can see all the information on the same page.
Okay, great. So, well, I see cameras going on and off. Andy, did you want to? Okay, you put your thumb up, so that's good. You can add it to the maps in terms of the table for the requested information here for. Remind me, Vice Mayor Chow, was that overall acreage, or was it overall acreage and something else?
Acreage of a site. If it has multiple parcels, then maybe just the total acreage will be fine. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And I do wonder, could we ask who exactly is the owner right now?
Of the Simeon property?
That information, yeah. Is that something we can ask?
I see our city manager has a hand raised.
Yes, Mr.
Pamela,
Mayor,
did
thank
you
you.
want to speak to that?
So I just wanted to clarify through Vice Mayor's request. So we will be reporting out the acreage throughout tonight's presentation, but I see that our consultant's also willing to add the information for tomorrow's presentation, and we'll certainly make that presentation available. Vice Mayor, I also heard you asking to have the comparison of the pipeline project. Is that something you would like to see for tomorrow's presentation or at a later date?
Not comparison. I think I just want to have information of the pipeline available, so that I can find them out.
Okay, then staff can follow up with you separately. And in terms of the property owner's information, as long as they're public information, we can make that available. I'm looking at my planning staff to see if those informations are readily available. If so, whether or not you have the capacity to make them into the chart by tomorrow.
Okay, anyone? I see Luke. Luke, did you want to speak to that last comment?
I think we will try to do what we can to get the owner information for the properties integrated.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can have one
more
thing.
Yes, please, go ahead.
And I just kind of wanted to walk through the process as I was walking through this process with my previous council before today. So this is the housing element site selection to make sure that the city has enough units for the next housing cycle. City staff and city council will have another chance to design the project in terms of sound wall, in terms of the cleanup, in terms of setback, in terms of other issues that are more project specific. So I do want to assure council and the staff that, when the project comes forward, there will be adequate environmental review provided before the approval is guaranteed. So this will be the high-level conceptual review to make sure to ensure HCD that we're providing enough units.
Fair enough. So let me just stop the clock on this. So just to be fair, Vice Mayor Chow. So just I guess it's fair to say, Madam City Manager, that if we have questions that may affect our view of the recommended density, for instance, or even inclusion of a particular site, that's fair game, right?
That's fair game. And Mr. Mayor, so we're recommending a number of units. In order to accommodate that, there's a possibility that planning staff may bring a rezoning or some sort of a different standard in front of council to consider.
Right.
So
right.
whether you want to go up and down, left and right, you still have that discretion.
Right. I mean, I understand that it is, it is a time issue as to whether you can explore every facet and detail of a particular parcel of land. But I mean, from what I've gauged, I think this level of questioning is pretty reasonable, thus far. I've been trying to keep us on track time-wise. But in terms of the depth of the detail, if you see something that goes a little bit too far into the weeds, just let us know. I mean,
certainly.
Okay.
I do want to kind of move it along because we do have 16 areas to go through. Just kind of want to remind council that when the night goes on further, we'll be tired. But this is not going to be your last time looking at the site, especially for most of the project planning staff can correct me. We probably don't have a proposal yet, so we're kind of designing this project in a vacuum.
Understood. Okay. Fair enough. Okay, Vice Mayor Chan, let me restart your time here. You're at about 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and so please continue.
I have no more questions.
Okay, great. Let me go to Councilmember Moore. You had utilized about a minute. So Councilmember Moore, why don't, if your hand is raised anew, please continue.
Hey, thank you, Mayor Paul. I was wondering if there was a recommendation from the Planning Commission or the Housing Commission with regards to having a step-down density for this particular site. My concern is that this particular neighborhood to the west is receiving, and as I had asked to have the screen share of the Valco project, it's receiving the brunt of an extremely tall project. And I'm concerned about this 50 dwelling units per acre, 65-foot height. How far away from these homes will that be? What's the setback in our current zoning? I don't want us to agree to something and then when it comes to us, we realize that the configuration of the site and whatnot makes it very contentious for the neighbors to the west. So I'd like to hear there was some consideration about the impacts there.
All right, planning staff. Luke, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, for this location, no, there was no concept of stepping down density or height. That discussion was limited to South D'Anza Boulevard and the Stevens Creek sites near Estates. So for the Simeon property, no, there was nothing like that. This had a uniform 50 unit per acre recommendation with no discussion of limiting it as you got near the neighborhoods.
Would this be the time to inject that kind of request into the study, Luke?
I certainly feel that if there is a concern like that in terms of lessening the density on one portion of the site or having some type of a condition that would perhaps limit building height, I think that would be fine since we've already raised height as a discussion topic tonight.
Right, it would probably be sensible, right? Because before you go forward with the EIR, you don't want to have to redo it if we were to impose a further restriction in the middle of this process, right? I mean, presumably some of the zoning would happen between now and, let's assume that we get this done, in this next couple of days, or maybe a session further down the road, but hopefully not too much further down the road. Let's say, the EIR is happening somewhere between now and 10 months out from now. Presumably some of the zoning is going to be, kind of considered for at least some of these sites. And so I think, please feel free, anyone, to interject. And I'm sorry, Councilmember Moore, let me go ahead and stop your time. If anyone disagrees with that, let us know. But for something like this, it really, does make a lot of sense to go ahead and, kind of put those restrictions in. Pew, you have your hand raised?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I did want to reiterate that I believe that the property owner has requested a certain number of units. And so if there is a discussion about stepping down density, that be considered in if you do decrease density in a certain part of the site, if the council would consider increasing density on the rest of the site in order to help the property owner make up for that difference. But at this point, I do believe they requested a certain number of units. And that's what this kind of is targeted to.
Okay, fair. So Councilmember Moore, I have 250, but let's go ahead and provide you another minute here. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to see what we can do here. If the 257, if that is the target number that they're looking for, I think that what the suggestion from Pew can happen. But I keep thinking density bonus waiver, even though I'm asking for this. We know that they can just take it as a waiver and go to the height that they feel that they need. And if you argue with it, you're going to end up in court. I think I'm understanding that correctly. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Moore. And I have a couple more hands raised from Councilmember Wei and Vice Mayor Chow. Let me see. Councilmember Wei, did you want to follow on here? Actually, you exhausted your time, interestingly enough, but let me see if anyone would like to cede any over. Oh, you're good? Okay. Vice Mayor Chow. Actually, you exhausted your time too. Councilmember Woolley, would you like to cede over any time to Vice Mayor Chow? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, great.
I think I forgot what I want to ask.
You forgot your question? Okay. Yeah, so, let me go. So the.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
The question is that I think that we don't also have the information what the property owner requested. I think that's good information to have because we had another public comment last time. It's a property owner who requested a density, but they didn't like the density assigned to them. So I think this information would be appreciated as part of the slide.
Okay, fair enough. Let me hold on. Let me stop you there. So I don't want all these kind of requests to collect. So before we kind of forget what they're, Andy, you said you had additional information for each of these sites. Do you have any additional information for this site with regard to owner communications?
The specifics are mostly held by staff. I do have the property owner interest form, so I do have some narrative that they might have shared. I don't have that prepared right this moment, but I could ready that, and maybe staff could discuss any particulars that they're aware of.
Okay. If staff wants to jump in and can provide some information pertinent to Vice Mayor Chow's question, and that had to do with what was the owner requesting on this site.
My understanding is that these are all developed from the owner interest forms that were received, and so.
Okay, let's just stop that there. Oh, thank you. Let's go back. Thank you, Pew. I apologize for cutting you off, but I think, yeah. Vice Mayor Chow, did you want to follow on with any additional questions?
No, I just wish to have this information to every site with the owner interest. If they did not specify density, that's good to know too. Thank you.
Okay, great. Councilmember Woolley, anything at this point? Okay. With the Simeon property here, I think that we do have a good opportunity. We should certainly be looking at the neighborhood off to the west. And in terms of a 50 dwelling unit per acre situation, you're talking about a 65-foot height. If it goes right up to the border, I would be very reticent with regard to making sure that you have some kind of buffer zone there where it is considerably, less height. And so looking at the rest of the configuration, it seems like you could assign a greater density to another area, but also briefly in terms of that density bonus question, what does the density bonus invocation do to the density with regard to any of these particular densities? But 50, does 50 go to 75 or does 50 go to some other number if the density bonus is invoked?
Yeah, so for projects that are primarily market rate but mixed income projects, the density bonus can go up to 50%.
Mm-hmm.
If 50 dwelling units per acre is the primary constraint on density, that could be increased to 75 dwelling units per acre if they provide the requisite number of affordable units and take the full density bonus.
Okay. So I would take it under as my comment. I would agree with Councilmember Moore and figure out a building plane plan such that if you were in the neighborhood, you would actually have a much closer to one-to-one type of, or whatever the proper building plan would be, such that you don't have an imposition of a maximally tall height right next to your border. With regard to the density bonus invocation, yes, and I understand what Councilmember Moore was referring to. The concessions, there's got to be some limits, and frankly, those limits haven't really been adequately explored at this time. But I think that's another entire policy-based conversation and legal interpretation study. So let's go ahead and move on. If we have any further quick follow-ons, but other than that, I think staff does have the requests. If you have that information at the ready as to the various backup information that we have for each of these sites, please do have that prepared. And then again, to reiterate, some of these map immediately available pieces of information are going to be ready for us tomorrow evening for the subsequent maps that we look at after tonight. So let's go on to map C. And great, so I think we might have skipped one over. Okay, great. And who would like to give us the North Blaney neighborhood introduction?
Okay, Mayor Paul, I will just give a brief overview. You have two properties in the North Blaney neighborhood. They're just south of 280, just to the east of Blaney. The larger of the two properties is a mini storage site, and the smaller property is a single-family residence that abuts right up to that. Those are the only two properties here. They're both shown at 30 dwelling units per acre, and like the Cupertino Village property, these are really treated as one contiguous site, even though there were two parcels. And that is really about all I have to add. I think if we want to get into questions, that would be good to do at this time.
Great, thanks, Luke. Councilmember Moore.
Hey, thank you. I believe this was the site that was commented on by a member of the public with regards to the single family home and regarding the interest or lack of interest of that owner to have their home included. Do I have that correct? And is it proper for us to include this? I believe it's a 0.37 acre portion. Is it proper for us to include it if the owner isn't interested, and has that lack of interest changed? I'd like to hear some information about that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Councilmember Moore. Anyone from staff? Andy?
I could try to give a brief answer on that. Councilmember Moore is correct that the single family home had come up in previous meetings. I had received an email that had indicated that the current owner is not interested in being a housing element site or developing in the 8-year period. The site was left on the list because it essentially rounds out the larger mini storage site. The question about whether owner interest is certainly something HCD is looking for, but a lack of owner interest would not necessarily eliminate a site. I think if the housing lot was treated as a standalone, it would not be a good site because it's such a small property. The only reason it was retained on the list is because it fits nicely with the larger property. But certainly if there's a desire to not have a site where the current owner has expressed that they're not interested, that would be the council's prerogative.
Okay, thanks very much, Councilmember Moore. You were at 140, and next we have Vice Mayor Chow.
Thank you. So both of these sites, the owner has not expressed interest. right?
That is, excuse me, yes, that is correct. But in the case of the single family home, the owner indicated that they would not be developing the mini storage site. We've not received any comment at all.
And then because I understand there are other sites I have inquired before, I'm told they are too small, even when there are actually 3 adjacent parcels together, they are big enough. So it's good to know that we are considering combining sites even when they actually are separate parcel and separate owners in the housing element. So is that the direction we are going now? Do these 2 sites have 2 different owners currently?
That is correct, but because they're contiguous and the property lays out like a single site, the smaller parcel was retained versus if it had been a standalone property.
Could I share the screen, please?
Mm-hmm.
So the reason is I'd like to share with the public, thank you for Pew for sharing this Cupertino property site. I forgot about that. It was very useful. You just Google for Cupertino property information, then you'll get this site. There is a login, ignore it, just don't log in, then you'll have free access. Here you enter a property address, then you'll see the property. So this is a mini storage site that's currently there in this single family home. And then they are across the street, they have other homes. Okay, so if just want to share this really useful tool by the city. Thank you. And then you have all the property information on the side, the acreage, yeah, and then even the current land use. Really useful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Vice Mayor Chow. You're at 2:30 with 30 seconds remaining. Yeah, and GIS is great. They really do some fantastic work there. So anyone else on map C at this time? Vice Mayor Chow, it seems like your hand raised again. Did you?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. Councilmember Wei.
Yes, I do understand that whether the owner has interest or not doesn't prevent us from include in the housing elements. But we do have an owner specific says she's not interested. So I would put that into a little bit more weight. And we do have a lot of tier 2 that we could consider. So this is what my personal is. I'm going to put this as a question mark going forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councilmember Wei. That was only about 20 seconds. And so let's see, Councilmember Moore, I have you at about 1:20 left. Did you want to, or let me check in with Councilmember Woolley. Did you have any comments on or questions, Map C?
I think I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councilmember Woolley. Councilmember Moore.
Okay, thank you. Does someone from staff recall the height of the public storage building, which they're right now they're kind of closing it up. But does someone remember that particular height? I know it's up on the hill, but I'm actually thinking about this 40-foot height. And what's kind of curious about this particular site is that you have the olive wood between the property line. So you've got a street and then some more space. And so I'm thinking in terms of setback and then doing a step up along the 280 and whether or not this could actually have some potential, perhaps going to the 45 foot
30 seconds.
amount. Okay. So
If I may ask a clarifying question to Councilmember Moore,
please
is this
go ahead.
a storage facility that is under construction right now, or the one that exists on the site right now?
the one that's under construction, yeah, if the top, I'm thinking about the highest parapet, but just so if we have something that's pretty tall along the 280, you know, that it would be okay. It is somewhat of a kind of a a valley feeling in that part of the 280 where the sides slope up and things are actually.
Okay, that's time. Let's go ahead and let staff answer that question.
So my understanding is the height limit in that area is 45 feet. So it would be in the range of 45 to 46 feet, let's say, for the building that's under construction at the public storage at the southwest corner of De Anza and 280.
Okay, so I'd be going for the 45 there with the higher density towards the freeway wall. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Moore. Vice Mayor Chow, did you have a brief follow-up? And Councilmember Woolley, I'm starting to allocate your time if you're okay with it. Okay, great. Vice Mayor Chow.
We will be replacing mini storage. I wonder how many this kind of mini storage we have in Cupertino or surrounding area.
Based on my knowledge of the city, I believe there are 5 mini storage locations in Cupertino, so this would be one of them.
Oh, 5. So there are plenty other areas still available.
There are 4 more locations.
Okay, that's good to know. If I can get some information about the size, how many storage units, that's not urgent. I'm just curious. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Mayor Chow. I don't see further hands raised on this item C. Councilmember Moore, your hand's raised. So Councilmember Woolley has about 2 minutes left. Did you want to ask a follow-on question?
More of a statement. I believe there were 2 storage projects. Did the one near Mary and I think it did get approved to have kind of a storage cell densification, for lack of a better term. But there was one near the Mary Avenue Bridge. And I don't know if that one did get approved. I have some vague recollection about that.
That did get approved, I believe, earlier this year.
Okay, thank you. So we've got that one, and then public storage was, I think it was just 1 story, and now it's maybe 4.
Public storage height is a little bit taller than the one at Mary Avenue, I believe.
Okay, so we actually have an increase that's happening that they're trying to rebuild. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councilmember Moore. Let's go on to Map D at this time. Map D.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Paul. We're now looking at the South Blaney neighborhood. So we've traveled pretty much straight down Blaney. At the bottom of the map, that blue line where you see the 2 yellow sites, that's Bollinger Road. So these 2 properties, the one on the west is fronting De Anza Boulevard. The one on the right is at Bollinger and South Blaney. There's owner interest for that. I believe that is typically referred to as the Tin Tin Market site. So the densities for these, the Blaney and Bollinger site is 20 units per acre. As you get towards De Anza Boulevard, those sites have a density of 30 units per acre. And again, both of these sites, 11A and B, are made up of multiple parcels, but they're treated as 2 independent sites. That concludes what staff has to say about this slide.
Okay, just a quick clarifying question. Technically, Luke, are these Tier 1 sites or are these Tier 2 sites?
These are both Tier 1 sites.
Okay, so where the column says Tier 2, it should read Tier 1, correct? On the table?
Yeah, that's misleading. I think the 1 going down the column is more indicative that they're Tier 1. So yeah, if that's misleading, that's not the case. They're both correctly shown on the map in the yellow color that indicates they're Tier 1.
Okay. All right, so would anyone like to start us off on questions or comments on Map D? Councilmember Moore.
Okay, thank you, and sorry, Luke, for this question. Could you again say where and why you've got the 20 dwelling units per acre? Which part of that site?
The 20 dwelling units per acre is site 11A. So it's uniformly over the site there at the South Blaney and Bollinger, the one with the red dot on it.
Right. Okay. So I'm not sure how to pronounce it properly, but Tin Tin Market was in the upper upper like northwest corner of that lot. The Walgreens is this, the square that's missing there on the corner. Okay, so was there a reason why the 20?
That was the commission's recommendation. I also believe that going into the meeting that was staff's recommendation as well. I think they're feeling that this was more of a neighborhood market, and I know there was also some discussion about potentially retaining commercial on the site, which would have then lessened the residential density.
Okay, and it's a church to the west, right?
Yes.
I believe you're correct, yes.
Okay.
If I may, I believe staff's recommendation going in was 30 dwelling units to the acre, with the understanding that there would be some commercial probably included with the project. But at 20 dwelling units to the acre, we're pretty much guaranteed to see townhome development with very little replacement commercial, unless we have some really different regulations.
Through the mayor, if we put the 30 and we want commercial, how tall will this end up being?
Oh, you still have the floor, Councilmember Moore, so, yeah.
Oh. Okay, so how tall will this end up being if we're doing, we've got the mix of the 30 and the 20, and it's saying target height's 35, but if we have commercial, are we really 50?
We would be looking at the 45-foot height.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Moore. That was at 2:15. You have 45 seconds. And so let's go to Councilmember Way.
All right, so my question is, on the Tintin site, 11A, it is designated 20 unit per acre. What would be the drawback or the concerns of the neighborhood if we up it to 30 unit per acre? Is that because the lot size is too small, is it not doable, or is it just because the planning commission believes that it's the neighborhood that we should limit to 20 instead of 30?
I will try to answer that.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I believe it could accommodate the 30 units per acre. There's many other sites this size that we are showing. And yeah, as I said, 44 of our 56 properties are 30 or 50 units per acre. So it's difficult to say exactly what the impact would be on the neighborhood. But again, the other site, 11B, which is nearby, that's shown at 30 units per acre as well. So I think it's more of a judgment call and a preference.
Okay, so I'm going to put on my market because it's a church on the west side and the east side is Blaney. There is some neighborhood on the north side, I believe. I'm very familiar with that site because I used to shop in Tintin. And so I'm going to put a question mark that we might be able to get 30 per acre if we eliminate some of the other sites. So that would be what I'm going to put on my note.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Way. You're at 145, and so 115 left. Councilmember Willie, you have your hand raised next.
Yeah. So my question is a little bit general, but I think this is a good, if you could put the map back up, this L-shaped lot. And so the question being a little bit more general, when we're talking 30 units per acre, I'm assuming that means underground parking?
Not necessarily at 30 units per acre, and I would be happy to defer to David Massington on this, but my guess is that's more of a tipping point. You're not necessarily going to have structured parking. I think housing, you're pushing the upper limit at that point, where you would then be going to structured parking.
So then at 40 units per acre, underground required, and one level of underground parking, and then 50 units, is that still achievable with one layer of underground parking? That's general for all these sites when we're talking 30, 40, 50. It just seems like an appropriate time to bring it up here when we have these houses all around it, and we're going to have underground parking?
Yeah, so the cost of underground parking is quite high. So I would think that you would need to at least get to 50 units per acre to even have a shot at validating that. But I think it would be a push. Most underground parking right now is costing, $45,000 a space. So that has a severe impact. I think they would go to an above ground garage or a deck before they would do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Thank you, Councilmember Woolley. Councilmember Woolley, you stand at 150 with about a minute 10 left. So let's go, Vice Mayor Chow. I think you have not yet spoken on this map. Vice Mayor Chow.
Yeah, thank you. So I wonder if 10A and 10B, they have the same owner.
Sites 11A and 11B, no, these are not under common ownership.
I mean, both of them are not under. If I can share the screen. Oh, you actually have that. Yeah, actually, let me share the screen that I got from the very nice city property information site. So this is 10A that I screenshot. So this 10A actually has 4 parcels, right? I think the middle one, we know it's vacant right now, but then you have 3 parcels will have occupants. So these 4 parcels have 4 different owners right now. Just trying to understand the background.
So I can help confirm 3 of the parcels, 20421-431 and 20411, are under the same ownership. 10710 was under the same ownership as those 3, but I believe that may have recently been transferred.
Okay, interesting. And then this one is from the 10A, Tintin Market. I see there are 1 parcel on top, 1 parcel that's Walgreens, and then it shows multiple parcels for these multiple stores. So are they all separate owners, or are they under one ownership?
So I can confirm that 10791 and 10787 are under the same ownership. All those multiple addresses that you see are just mailing addresses and not necessarily parcels.
Okay, so the one on the left, they are all one ownership.
Correct, and it's the same ownership as the one on the top right.
But the Walgreens is a separate owner.
Correct.
Right now.
Walgreens owns its own property.
And now we are hoping to zone the entire site as well.
Not including Walgreens.
Oh, so the 10A doesn't include Walgreens.
Correct.
Okay.
I believe these are 11, but I may be wrong.
30 seconds.
Okay. And for Canyon Crossing, I remember they did have underground parking. So what's their density and height?
That is 30 feet in that area, and their density is 15 dwelling units per acre for that particular parcel. But they're not very happy about having to do it. I can tell you that if they could, they would not have done that.
But then they were able to do it, and then they were able to, in fact, provide retail and also underground parking.
Correct, but they also did have detached
feasible.
They had detached single-family homes to kind of bolster that, to prop that project up.
Okay, that was time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. So we'll go ahead and can you put your original map up, Luke, for map D, please? And I'll go ahead and start my clock at about 30 seconds or so. Great. So with regard to the fiscal viability, I want to hear again what I thought I heard previously. Pew, did you say that you think that it's not financially viable at 20 dwelling units per acre, that 30 dwelling units would be necessary, or did I hear that incorrectly?
No, I just wanted to make the point that if there was to be commercial development included at 20 dwelling units to the acre, the best bang for your buck would probably be townhome development.
Okay. Okay, I see. At 20 dwelling units per acre. Okay. And gosh, I really want to ask this question, but city attorney, stop me if you just don't feel like it's appropriately noticed. But Bollinger has had some issues with regard to traffic incidents, and this is actually part of a pedestrian. I'm not sure if bikes have been an issue, but I'm sure we're looking at it for potential improvements over time. I mean, is there anything that we could be doing related to this that could help out? I mean, especially with things like, perhaps movement of kids across Bollinger over to West San Jose and vice versa. I mean, this actually is at a major intersection or near it, with the Walgreens at that intersection. Is there something that we've been considering, and might it relate to, density issues? I don't see anyone turning on a camera or city attorney.
I think that's probably a question for our traffic manager, and I'm not sure that he's in attendance tonight.
Okay, that's fair. All right, so I guess that was my primary question on this one. 20 dwelling units per acre, that does seem a bit low, and it doesn't give us the very low or low income statutory assumption, and so I'm going to hold this in abeyance for kind of considering whether we should perhaps up it a bit, but that's my question and comment. So I guess I stand at about 2.5. Hold on one second, Councilmember Way. Let me see where you're at. Well, you're abundant on time, but I do have a couple of other of the. I'll come back to you. Is that okay? Okay. So for this next round going through, Councilmember or Andy, did you want to address anything that I was asking about, or?
Yes, if I could, just briefly.
Yeah, please.
Just briefly.
Yes.
Your question can lead to further discussion in our next policy part of our update cycle, and that's that if you were to bring this up to 30 dwelling units per acre, it would be advantageous for us to consider within our policies any kinds of improvements that might be able to be made. That is something that HCD likes to look to. So I just want to put a pin in that for discussion in the future. Okay, great. Thank you. I'll definitely make a mental note of that because it can actually affect quite a few things. So we'll go, let me just let everyone know. Councilmember Moore, you have about 45 seconds. Councilmember Way, 1:15. Councilmember Willie, you'll have to remind me because I didn't write down your time, if you had exhausted your time, and then we'll go back with any other quick additional questions. Councilmember Moore?
Hey, thank you. So I really liked the other map because I could get a sense of where the 2.7 acres actually is. And if you move it up to 30 dwelling units per acre, that density gets you another 27 units across the whole site. You get another a little over 5. So I am curious about that. The odd shape of the 2.7 acres actually lends itself, in my opinion, to the potential to have the step down to that one, looks like one neighboring home to the north. And I'm looking at the VTA map just because I know there's the bus down Bollinger, which will take you over to De Anza College, the 25. So you are on a bus route there. And I would keep that in mind because I think as it gets denser in this area, that route's going to be pretty popular. Right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Moore. And that's time for you. And let's go to Councilmember Way, who had a follow-up.
Actually, a real quick follow-up, and actually probably being answered already. If we go to 30 per acre, then we would have more low-income housing opportunities, and as well as a lot more mitigation opportunities. Is that a fair statement?
Well, certainly legally, we would be designated at 30 dwelling units an acre as being, in the low income and the very low income range, presumptively. Okay. So, okay. Okay, so that was pretty brief, about 20 seconds or so. So anyone else at this time? Councilmember Willie, you have your hand raised, but no, you didn't? Okay. So let's go on to map E at this time, doing a quick time check at 8:10. I will likely call another 5-minute break after either map E or map F. So let's take a look at map E.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Paul. This is map E, heart of the city, East Special Area. There are 2 Tier 1 sites on here, 18A and B. We also have a couple Tier 2 sites shown in orange, 18C and D. The Tier 1 sites are directly opposite from the Valco property on across Stevens Creek. I believe it's the United Furniture site is 18A. 18B is the gas station. These sites were recommended at a density, again, that's split, with the portion closer to Stevens Creek Boulevard being 50 units per acre. And these portions that would be close on N18A, that would be closer to residential neighborhoods, would be down to 25 units per acre. So I guess if you average that over the site, it would be 37.5 units per acre if it was broken down 50-50. And these are the only, I believe, heart of the city Tier 1 properties that we have. So that concludes staff's initial presentation on this slide.
Thanks, Luke. So firsthand from Councilmember Moore.
Well, for me, with regards to Heart of the City, I would want to look at Heart of the City East, Center, Crossroads, and West. I don't think there's anything out in the West area. I would actually want us to go through all 3 and then work on it, because the Crossroads area, I believe, was not brought to the Planning Commission. This was something we talked about when we first looked at this. So there's a group there that I think we need to have a discussion about with regards to equity and balancing and what our plan is. So I don't personally want to agree to anything with regards to the East Special Area without having a full look across, because the situation's changed since it went to the Planning and Housing Commission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Moore. That was 50 seconds. And so, Councilmember Willie, you're next. You have your hand raised.
Yeah, my comment on this is, I just don't think we're being equitable when we start looking at this one. We've got Valco, 2,402 units at that area of the entire city. And now we're talking Simeon property, which we already discussed, at 257 units. And now we're saying, well, United Furniture, let's go ahead and put another 165 units. I just can't climb on board with that. I think Simeon property is a unique one. It's more or less a continuation of the Valco property, and it's up against the freeway. Doesn't really lend itself to something else. But this is, a major retail area. United Furniture currently, along with a few other shops that are in there. And as I brought up at the very beginning, we've got Bub Road, all that office. We've got Valco, 2 million square feet of office coming, really tearing into the jobs to housing ratio. I think we should be seriously looking at potentially reducing the office on Bub Road to kind of do some type of compensation for this 2 million square feet and put high density housing where it's at a transit section with 85 right there, and it's sandwiched between that 85 and the railroad tracks, so the high density. And I'm going to go and drive it tomorrow and see how many of those current buildings are vacant. I really hope staff is going to come back. They maybe can't do it tomorrow, but I'm hoping they're going to come back and say, we have contacted every one of those owners, and not a single one of those owners is saying they want to do anything. I mean, I can go and share my screen again and bring that back up. It is just all buildings, office buildings on Bub Road, and here we are just overloading this one chunk of the town. I just can't understand how we just keep leaving a big void on Bub Road and saying we're just going to dense out this one area that we have no choice with the Valco SB 35. Yes, we have no choice. We're going to make it worse?
Time, you can have
Okay,
my time, though.
thank you.
Okay, you're exactly 3 minutes. Is there further comment here? I don't see hands raised here, but Councilmember Way, and
just
I'll
a
put
quick
this on mine,
question.
too.
So on 18B, the gas station, the owner has not expressed interest, or they're just not responding to it?
They have not expressed interest. We've not heard anything one way or the other from them.
Okay, yeah, that was 15 seconds. So, all right, 18A, that is the United Furniture Shopping Center, or the shopping center that has United Furniture in it. And so I guess at this time, given what Andy was saying with regard to, potential other things that could come about as an adjunct result of development. I mean, I think we can stipulate that across Stevens Creek Boulevard, with 2,402, units of housing and near 2 million square feet of office, I mean, it's going to loom large over this site, right? I mean, it is truly difficult to visualize, my augmented reality workshop, notwithstanding from, yesterday, even if we could, put that on a camera, I had to put in a plug for that, right? But, even if you could visualize it right now, it's quite a substantial change. I would like to have a sense of, if staff does have an immediate idea or perhaps set of ideas of what could be happening at 18A or 18B to be, kind of, I don't know what the right verb here is, but to take into account what's happening north of Stevens Creek Boulevard. And Pew, you look like you're up for it. You have your camera on. Any thoughts on this? I mean, within the context, of course, of the fact that we're having a housing density discussion, but anything else that we can keep in our mind here?
Sure. I just did want to state that, the property owner is very interested in developing housing here. We did see a very preliminary concept of townhome development here, and, which would be at the 45-foot height limit. And so we're just trying to, like we said, when the housing element process kind of came about, the property owner approached us and said that this is what we want to do. We want to have a little bit of higher density here in order to have the, ability to provide some underground parking or do something. So have a little bit of increased height, but have more units on it. Because the maximum units that they could have on here is about 55, I want to say, and they didn't even want to build that with the original proposal that they were coming in at.
And what about the idea of, I don't know, ground floor retail? I mean, has that been broached?
That has been broached. Again, I don't believe there, with the original proposal we saw a very small retail pad, that they just wanted preliminary, assessment from us on what can and can't be done. So there wasn't a whole lot of retail, I will put that out there, but it did include, the original plans did include the gas station, but now they've kind of toned it back.
Thank you. Okay. Let's go to Councilmember Moore, but let me check my notes here as to what our timings look like. Oh, Councilmember Moore, you have plenty of time. Did Vice Mayor Chow, did you want to say anything on this, or should I go back through?
So, yeah, I have a question. So, for 18A United Furniture, have they expressed whether they will preserve the current retail on the site, or they only want to build more housing?
I don't believe they are interested in preserving as much retail as there is right now. It's a very large warehouse furniture store right now. And so there is very little interest in providing retail in any development that we're seeing.
What's the total acreage for this site? It's okay. I'll get the information tomorrow. And for the gas station, that gas station is I think a pretty popular one, maybe the only one that many people can walk to. You can leave your car and then walk or take Via to go home. If the owner doesn't have interest, why is that put on tier 1? And it's a really tiny site too.
It's just provided as an when we kind of looked at the whole site, the two sites are kind of I won't say they're owned by the same people, but they're owned within the same family. And so that was kind of a consideration that we looked at when looking at the sites. I will also say that the state of California is going to not sell gas cars anymore past 2035. But
you
that
still
doesn't
need a
mean
garage. Whether you need gas or not, you still need a garage. And that's a really tiny site, even if it's right next to a bigger one. So I don't understand that. And then the other two sites, the 10C, and sorry, can't read. The 18C, that's currently is that the Bank of America site? Or it's currently an office building, right?
Correct. I believe it's next to Silvar, or it might be the Silvar building. The Silicon Valley real estate. Yeah, there are office buildings.
So this is an office building, and this is kind of like the kind we would want to see to convert more office to housing. So how come this, and with owner interest, how come this one was not added as tier 1? What were the concerns?
30 seconds.
I believe this was the Planning Commission's recommendation to keep these on tier 2.
I mean, what were their concerns for adding them as tier 1? That's what I'm trying to understand.
I believe it was the increased housing potential on the east side of the city.
Okay. And then on the one in the middle, 18C, what's currently there?
I think you mean 18D, Vice Mayor.
18D. Yeah, sorry.
I believe it is also another office building.
That's also an office site.
Right.
Okay,
that's really good to know
that's
the
time.
current office building. Okay.
Okay. Council Member Moore, you had over 2 minutes remaining, a little over.
Okay, so I'd like to continue on with what the Vice Mayor was looking at. I'm actually also interested in 18C and 18D, and the table does not show the total new units. So I'm pretty interested in having those moved from tier 2 to tier 1, and because I like the distribution there, and I don't like the 50 dwelling units per acre that was put across all of the 18s that we have here. So if 18C, it looks like it's the 0.96 acres plus 1.71 at the 50 dwelling units per acre. I'd kind of like it that even if these were tier 2, that you would show us what the potential total is, even if it's done like in a pale gray font or something to distinguish it, or some color, or anyway to know it. But I'd like to know what the yield would be if we did that for looked at that for tier 2. Because essentially I want to negotiate with the heart of the city locations and have some better distribution in that area, rather than having everything impacting the Wolf Stevens Creek intersection. And I do certainly agree with we're still going to need garages to fix the dents and all this stuff that happens. And even the Tesla shop's very, very busy if you're trying to get a spot in there. So it's not, that need is not going to go away. It's just going to be different. So does anyone know the total there for 18, looking at 18C at tier 2?
18C would be about 80 units at 30 dwelling units to the acre. And
how many was that again?
At 30 dwelling units to the acre, it would be about 80 units.
80. Okay. And is that that's for the two parts to 18C?
That's
together.
both of them together.
Okay. And that's a townhouse looking arrangement?
That's time. Councilmember White, would you like to cede over some of your time? Are you okay with that? You only use 20 seconds.
I'm okay with what I have, but I think
All right, great. Thank you.
move on.
Okay, Councilmember Willie Moore. I'm sorry. You were in the middle of a thought, so and you had gotten out that 18C has about 18 units. And Pew, I'll just ask as a very brief after follow up. How many did 18D have?
18C would have 80 dwelling units to the acre, and the other one, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back here.
Oh, no, 80 dwelling units total, not per acre, right?
Correct, 80 for 18C, and for 18D, it's about 36 units.
36, okay.
At 30 dwelling units to the acre, not 50.
At 30, right. Okay. Anyone else at this time? Councilmember Way, you have about 2 minutes.
So I'm going to make one brief comment because we are very concerned about the 1.8 million square footage of office space at Valco and or the Rise. This sits right across it, and I think could complement the housing shortage that the Rise is bringing. I understand the balance that we need to be, so we just keep this in mind, and then as we go into the west side, though I really don't believe in east-west side, but that's okay. We can just keep this in mind.
Okay, great. Let's go to Councilmember Willie, and I guess we'll borrow some time from Councilmember Way, if that's okay. All right, Councilmember Willie.
Yeah, I'm just going to reiterate again. All that density on Stevens Creek Boulevard, it's going to be a mess. We need to be more equitable and spreading out all of the transit that's going to be going to this increased density and shifting it less than a block away is not going to help Stevens Creek. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Councilmember Willie. I agree. It really, if you look at the pipeline units, and there's no reason why you shouldn't, I mean, really, just in any way you slice the exercise, it's a lot of units there. Okay, let's go, and I have 8:27 on computer clock. Let's go ahead and reconvene at 8:33. We'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll start up with map F. Thank you. We'll see you then.